This is a compilation of Portal lore I have created over the past few years. No intros, no outros, just lore. Enjoy. Here we explore in the lore and story behind Wheatley. Deep underground in Upper Michigan, the Aperture Science team worked on top secret technologies in the Enrichment Center. Within this center, Cave Johnson, the CEO of Aperture, had tasked one of the teams to develop an artificial technology system that could hold a human mind as well as run the entire facility. Cave had been diagnosed with moon rock poisoning and only had a limited time to live. But if he could transfer his mind to a machine, he could live forever. And so, the genetic lifeform and disk operating system, also known as GLaDOS, began. Heading into the 2000s, the technicians had managed to make this request a reality, but at this point, Cave had succumbed to his disease. In this case, they uploaded his assistant instead, Carolyn, to live on as a machine and run Aperture, but this did not go to plan. Upon activation, GLaDOS became highly aggressive and attempted to lock down the facility and murder the personnel. After many attempts, the technicians sought a way to curb her murderous tendencies, and so they began to develop something new to help with this problem: small sentient personality constructs. They believed that when attached to GLaDOS, they would, in essence, positively affect the way she perceived and interacted with the world around her, and with this, Wheatley was developed and constructed for this very task. Dubbed by Aperture technicians as an intelligence dampening sphere, they designed Wheatley to generate a constant stream of stupid ideas. They hypothesized that upon attachment to the murderous robot, his stream of stupidity would essentially distract GLaDOS and leave her docile by preventing her ability to think properly. It is unknown how effective Wheatley was when connected to GLaDOS, but as time passed, other cores were developed with the aim to be more efficient. The curiosity, anger, intelligence, and morality core were later attached to the robot, which appeared to have a substantial effect on GLaDOS's motives. Following the implementation of these cores, Wheatley was removed from GLaDOS, where he would be assigned to other roles across the facility. At one point, Wheatley attempted to get a job at the Aperture manufacturing department, but would lose out on this role to a duplicate copy of the foreman, in which he would later move on to caring for the test volunteers in the Extended Relaxation Center, a role some believe would begin a slight dislike for the humans he was tasked to care for, in which he himself would call them smelly humans. Regardless of the almost degrading existence he had been designed for, Wheatley appeared to seemingly be positive about most of the situations he found himself in. Designed to be a tool to reduce the efficiency of another machine, these personality traits would leave him to frequently attempt to appear smarter and more able than he was, and as time passed, he would show that he was actually more resourceful and maybe even more intelligent than his creators designed him to be. The issue he had was that he did not believe in his own abilities and would be a little too trusting of those around him. On one occasion, he was told that if he activated a light on his core, he would die, but he believed this to be true. As time passed, Wheatley continued to care for the inhabitants of the Extended Relaxation Vault while Aperture tested its many products and attempted to keep GLaDOS in check. During this time, GLaDOS began to comply with her technicians and appeared to genuinely care about testing, but then everything changed. On one occasion of activation, GLaDOS managed to trick the scientists into giving her neurotoxin. Upon receiving this, she locked down the entire facility and killed the personnel within. With full control of Aperture, GLaDOS began her own testing cycle and worked through the test subjects within the Extended Relaxation Vault that Wheatley had watched over and cared for. During this event, it is unknown what role Wheatley played or whether he was even online, but after the defeat of GLaDOS at the hands of a test subject, Chell, many cores were reactivated and came back online. Some believe Wheatley was one of these. The robot that he and many others had feared was gone, but her presence was still felt across the facility. Appearing to be more capable of human emotion than the other robots at the facility, Wheatley was shown to be incredibly patient over the following years, as the facility was, in part, claimed back by nature. Some believe this period of time to have been merely 50 years, while others believe it could have been as much as 50,000. But with the facility still out of reach of the outside world, no one knows for sure. Over this time, the reactor core in Aperture became unstable, and so Wheatley had one thought in mind: to escape Aperture before it exploded. Escaping the Aperture Science Facility would not be an easy feat for a human, never mind a robot that relied on rails to navigate the facility. If Wheatley could gather the help of one of the humans still asleep in the extended relaxation vault, maybe he could achieve this. While Wheatley was designed to be a burden on those he came across, his own ability to ask others for help was one of his greater qualities, and with GLaDOS offline, he could reach these test subjects without her interference. It is believed that Wheatley woke up these test subjects with a plan to use them and their natural human gifts to acquire the portal gun to help him and themselves escape the facility. But during their attempts to even reach the gun, the humans fell to the degraded Aperture facility and the traps that GLaDOS had set for Chell. Over time, Wheatley came upon the extended relaxation vault of Chell. Unknown to him at this point, this was the test subject that had defeated GLaDOS. After entering her vault, Wheatley met Chell. After talking to her, he deemed that she may have a very small case of brain damage, but regardless, they went on together to attempt to escape the facility on the brink of destruction. As they made their way to GLaDOS's chamber, Wheatley attempted to impress Chell with his knowledge of the facility, where they built up trust together. Chell could use the portal device to navigate the facility and help them get past obstructions, while Wheatley could use his ability to interact with the interfaces scattered across Aperture to open panels and doors for them. To escape the facility, Wheatley led Chell through the central AI chamber where GLaDOS had once controlled and dominated Aperture. All they needed to do was access the main breaker room to call an elevator to the surface. Even entering this chamber of GLaDOS spread fear through Wheatley. This robot had caused so much damage and pain in the facility. They just had to be very careful not to activate her again. Trusting Chell, Wheatley instructed her to activate only the switch of the escape pod, but with this machinery having degraded over time, it malfunctioned where it activated GLaDOS instead. With Aperture normally having failsafes in place to stop operations from activating, Wheatley attempted to stop the activation of all of these switches, but an elevator lifted them back into the chamber and unfortunately could not find the password to abort the operation, and in desperation attempted to obtain it through trial and error by beginning to guess every possible outcome. While this attempt and optimism could be commended, it was too late where they watched GLaDOS reactivate. Almost instantly, GLaDOS recognized the test subject that had murdered her. In response to seeing them, she used one of her retractable claws to crush the shell of Wheatley's core and place Chell back into the testing track. Having been dropped by GLaDOS, Wheatley managed to survive this attack by salvaging parts from another spare core in the facility. GLaDOS was awake, but Chell still lived, and so he hoped that he could still use her to gain freedom. He just had to find her and help the test subject escape first. Not only that, but he had also formed his own plan on how to take her down. As Chell moved on to another chamber, Wheatley came for her. Upon tampering with the power in this test chamber, Wheatley opened up a panel, and in a moment of heroism, he believed he could communicate with Chell if he spoke in an American accent. For some reason, he thought that in doing this, GLaDOS would be unable to hear him, but he was incorrect, which only alerted her to his presence and reduced her already low opinion of him even further. Regardless, using this open panel, he and Chell escaped deeper into the facility. Wheatley knew of how the battle between GLaDOS and Chell had gone, and with Chell as his ticket out of the facility, he prepared for a battle if it were to occur. GLaDOS relied on her turret and neurotoxin, and so he just had to take them out of play for her. As the duo navigated the facility, Wheatley guided Chell to their first location, the turret manufacturing plant. Upon completion of a turret, the factory would check with a template to see if it was a good turret or defective. To get the template, Wheatley had to get them access to the little office it was held in. Aware that he could not hack the door, he asked Chell to turn around so he could smash the window instead. This moment suggesting his own insecurity about his inability to open the door. Under Wheatley's instructions, Chell removed the turret template, but the facility resorted to continuing from memory. Wheatley had brought them this far, and Chell would figure out that all they needed to do was place a defective turret in the template slot, making all of the future turrets approved defective and unusable in battle. Next, Wheatley guided Chell to the neurotoxin generator. Unable to destroy it himself, he waited for Chell to come up with a way to stop GLaDOS from accessing it, to which she made use of a laser in combination with portals to sever the neurotoxin supply. Now with both of GLaDOS's weapons out of action, they were ready to fight her and begin the next phase of Wheatley's plan. Upon arriving in GLaDOS's chamber, Wheatley's plan of sabotage went through successfully, leaving GLaDOS vulnerable to the duo. Not only did they defeat GLaDOS, but they were also able to trigger a core transfer, a transfer that would allow Wheatley to take over control of the facility, and with it, allow access to the surface. With Chell doing all of the hard work, the facility accepted a core transfer where GLaDOS's core was replaced with Wheatley. His plan had been successful, and with most of Aperture under his control, he called for an elevator so that he and Chell could leave. The only issue they had was figuring out how he could get into the elevator if he was still attached to the central AI system. This new wave of power felt great, different to what he had experienced since his creation, and this power would completely change the way he viewed Aperture. With full control of the facility, Wheatley basked in the power he now had, and as he watched Chell begin her ascent to the surface above, he noticed just how small she was. He had been treated badly for his whole existence, and now he could prove everyone wrong. Due to her awful treatment of him, Wheatley decided to take GLaDOS and place her into a potato battery, a humiliating punishment for a robot that had once spread fear to those around her. During this time, GLaDOS mocked him and angered him, stating that Chell had done all the work to get here. Although Chell had helped him reach this point, GLaDOS's words fed into his paranoia and fear that maybe Chell had used him and that she had ordered him around, when in reality, it was he that had ordered the mute test subject around. Furthermore, he began to believe that Chell and GLaDOS had somehow been working together since the beginning, but what their goal was, in his mind, is unknown. Upon being called a moron by Potato Battery GLaDOS, who had fallen into the elevator with Chell, in a fit of rage, he smashed at the elevator, leaving it to fall into the forgotten parts of the Aperture Science facility below. With Chell and GLaDOS out of the way, escaping Aperture became a dream of the past. The ability to control the facility, of course, came with an immense wave of power, but it also came with a curse. The technicians had programmed the core AI system to be rewarded for testing, as Aperture was built upon testing. When a test had been completed successfully, the AI system would be given a euphoric response, which would increase the productivity of the robot in control of the facility. GLaDOS had managed to control this and deal with the lack of completion, but Wheatley was not as strong as her, and so, with no test chambers being completed by subjects, he would fall to the itch, a need to have test chambers completed just to get that feeling of euphoria. The issue was that he had dropped the only surviving test subject into the facility below, out of reach. With the itch controlling his desire to complete tests, Wheatley became more creative in what he could use for test subjects. Although he had shown moments of brilliance during his time with Chell, his time going forward would show only disappointment. The facility, now renamed Wheatley Laboratories, was not being cared for as it once was during GLaDOS's control, and so the nuclear reactor began to melt down once again. He had initially sought to escape Aperture to survive this nuclear meltdown until GLaDOS had retaken control, but without the insight on what the issue was or how to fix it, he merely shut off the alarms of Aperture, leaving the situation to become worse. To satisfy his need to have test chambers completed, Wheatley created the Franken turret, a brutal combination of the turret and companion cube. Unfortunately, these creations did not perform as well as he anticipated, and instead of seeking alternate methods of chamber completion, he just shouted at the Franken turrets in the hope they would improve. To his luck, Chell and GLaDOS managed to escape the forgotten parts of Aperture and returned to the main section of the enrichment center, but the duo had a plan to regain control. GLaDOS believed that if she gave Wheatley a paradox, it would disable him, but in classic Wheatley fashion, he completely missed the nature of the paradox and did not understand the phrase, "This sentence is false," and with it, bypassed the paradox. Although he had avoided being disabled, the Franken turrets were affected by it, and subsequently were disabled, suggesting that these simple contraptions were smarter than Wheatley. This inability to understand the contradiction not only saved Wheatley from being disabled, but it also allowed him to capture Chell, where testing could commence. Aperture was close to a nuclear meltdown, and having bonded during their time together, Chell and GLaDOS planned to give control of the facility back to GLaDOS, but the duo just needed to escape Wheatley's new testing track. Through her capture, Chell was able to give Wheatley short bursts of euphoria as she completed each test chamber. As he had no experience in constructing his own chambers, he relied on repositioning and adjusting the chambers that GLaDOS had already set up. He believed, at one point, that Chell could just complete the same chamber multiple times to achieve a registered completion, but the system did not work that way. Wheatley knew of GLaDOS's treatment of Chell during their initial run of the facility, and so he adapted and blatantly stole some of GLaDOS's insults to break down and upset the test subject, where on one occasion, he called her fatty no parents, taken from comments GLaDOS had made about Chell's weight and a lack of parents. During his exploration of the facility, Wheatley discovered two robots that GLaDOS had constructed just before she had been transferred into the potato battery. Chell was a problem that had the potential to remove him from power, and so these robots could take her place and test for him instead. He just needed to take out Chell. Welcoming Chell into another test chamber, Wheatley rigged an aerial faceplate so that it would launch her out of the chamber to a foolproof trap surrounded by large spikes. This trap would have killed the subject if Wheatley had not gloated to her about his process and how he had come up with the trap. Wheatley had underestimated this subject, and using her wit and knowledge of Aperture's products, Chell managed to evade death by portaling herself to safety. This trap had been a great idea by Wheatley, considering he had been constructed to develop stupid ideas, but his need to explain and, in a sense, gain admiration and approval from Chell had led to this trap failing. In preparation for an inevitable showdown, Wheatley watched footage of Chell's original fight with GLaDOS and set up his lair to give him any advantage he could gain over her. He rigged the stalemate resolution button so that if Chell attempted to activate a core transfer, the bombs would explode. He then removed all portalable surfaces, reactivated the neurotoxin, developed bombs to use against the test subject, and had bomb-proof shields constructed so that Chell could not use them against him. As Chell entered his lair, Wheatley explained that the facility would explode in 6 minutes, and so he gave himself 3 minutes to kill her, a minute break, and then 2 more minutes to save the facility. After mocking and berating the test subject, the two fought, but Chell and GLaDOS had a plan. Chell, of course, took advantage of the faults in Wheatley's lair, where she used a bomb to break open a pipe containing conversion gel. With this gel, she could create portalable surfaces. With these surfaces, Chell sent back Wheatley's bombs through portals into vulnerable spots, attached corrupted cores to Wheatley to weaken him, and finally attempted to initiate a core transfer. Due to his preparation, the bombs around the stalemate resolution button exploded, throwing Chell back. It appeared that Wheatley had won, but his inability to stop the reactor meltdown had led to explosions and fires across Aperture, leaving a hole to form in the roof of Wheatley's lair. Using this opportunity, Chell fired one portal at the moon and another underneath Wheatley. In an instant, the force of space pulled through everything it could from Earth to the moon. As Chell was pulled through, she grabbed Wheatley, pulling him through with her, leaving a single wire connecting them both to Earth. During this chaos, GLaDOS managed to reconnect herself to the central AI, and now with full control over Aperture once again, she pulled Chell back into the facility, leaving Wheatley out in space. Wheatley had been developed to form a constant string of stupid thoughts to stop the murderous tendencies of GLaDOS, but unknown to the technicians of Aperture, he ended up becoming much smarter than any of them could have imagined. He may have had some missteps throughout his time on Earth, but with time alone in space, Wheatley can now think about what he had done during his short reign of Aperture. It appears that Wheatley's connection to the central AI chamber had amplified his fears, one of which being a fear that Chell would abandon him for GLaDOS, and so he acted irrationally, which ultimately led to his demise. He was clearly insecure about the perception others had of him, something GLaDOS caught onto, where she would call him a moron to merely get a reaction. Lost in space, seemingly extremely remorseful and apologetic about his actions to Chell, Wheatley will have to wait for someone or something to come and bring him back to Earth. And just maybe, he can make up for what he did. Here, we explore in the lore and story behind the personality cores of the Aperture Science Facility. As Aperture completed the development of one of their most ambitious projects, the genetic lifeform and disk operating system, they activated her for the first time, but she did not respond in the way the technicians expected her to. GLaDOS had been designed and constructed to run Aperture and accelerate the projects in development. She was also the first known sentient robot that came from the upload of a human consciousness. She had once been Carolyn, the CEO of Aperture, after the previous CEO, Cave Johnson, had passed away. Something had gone wrong during her upload, and upon her first activation, GLaDOS showed no trace of Carolyn's personality, and instead, she attempted to murder the entire facility. After she was quickly shut down, the technicians on the GLaDOS project sought a way to adapt her personality and curb her murderous intention. Aperture understood AI technology very well. This understanding and development of the personality construct technology itself allowed Aperture to create advanced weaponry and intelligent sentient equipment, which is where the personality construct came into existence. The technicians needed something smart, adaptable, and versatile to navigate the enrichment center under the orders and programming of whoever needed a job completed. Something that could attach to the various machines and robots of Aperture and operate them. In this early stage of development, the Personality Core team designed them as spherical objects, very similar to the appearance of an eye. This eye design granted the technicians the ability to adapt these spheres with various cosmetic features to differentiate them, as each core created had a different personality and function in the Aperture Science Facility. These cosmetic changes came in the form of different sized pupils, eye colors, and casings. Aside from these visual alterations, their eyes allowed the sentient spheres to observe their surroundings as they completed their tasks around Aperture. Alongside this, the technicians developed cases to put each core in. These not only protected them from potential fall damage, but they also gave the cores access to aperture machinery through 3 pin plugs, which, when connected to, allowed them to operate the machinery to the specifications of their programming. As the personality cores were required to travel across the whole facility, they had 2 main ways of navigating. The first, physically by hand of an aperture employee, who typically used the handles on their cases to hold them, and the second and most common, the aperture technicians installed rails across aperture so that the cores could easily attach and detach from them on will. For the darker regions of aperture, the technicians also installed a flashlight within their eye to light up their surroundings for themselves or the technicians who worked alongside them. As the technicians knew that an extremely high number of personality cores would be scattered across the entire facility, they had to design them with limited maintenance in mind. So, they created a powerful and efficient battery that kept them running for large periods of time for as little as 1.1 volts. This came as a part of Aperture's Apocalypse Protocol, in which they prepared the facility just in case an event of significance did occur that required Aperture to continue functioning without maintenance or human interference. In theory, with their design, some believed they could last for thousands of years, and with it, so would Aperture if the nanobots and cores kept the structure and foundation of Aperture secure. These cores, as in their name, were sentient with personalities, and as such, had some of their own ideas on how to run the facility and navigate it. For the most part, they were compliant and happy to get on with their roles. But others either refused to follow orders or simply lacked the programming or capability to complete their tasks. As they had to communicate with each other and Aperture's personnel, they were given the ability to communicate through various languages. This was yet another groundbreaking scientific advancement for Aperture science, as these cores displayed traits and acted extremely similar to humanity. Some even had the ability to portray emotions, anger, curiosity, happiness, and sadness. And as they were set to work, the technicians would have to make tweaks to their programming to make them as efficient as possible. The technicians believed that if they could attach the perfect blend of personality core to GLaDOS, this would, in turn, adapt her personality to align more with the views of Aperture and their goals. So, they got to work on the development of new cores that would effectively inject their thoughts and beliefs into her processes. Over time, many cores were developed and attached to GLaDOS in the hopes they would adjust her actions. But time after time, GLaDOS continued to attempt to murder the facility. However, the scientists did notice that her attempts to shut down the facility took longer each time she was activated, which suggested that although their new cores failed at their attempts to stop her, they did delay her, even if the delay was less than a second. For the cores that were not used, they were either stored away or repurposed to work in different regions of Aperture. On their aim to perfect the combination of cores, the technicians began work on a new core, in which they named the Intelligence Dampening Sphere. They believed that if they could create a core that would release a constant stream of stupid ideas, it would prevent her from actually thinking about murdering the facility. And for a little while, this core worked where GLaDOS would later refer to it as a tumor. But the core, just like many others, did not last for long. So, just like all of the others, they repurposed it. The enrichment center and maintenance areas of Aperture was such a large space to maintain. However, the personality cores allowed the Aperture personnel to control, adapt, and operate the entire facility with ease, where the personality cores and nanobots became the backbone of Aperture. Across the Aperture Science facility, the personality cores worked with the scientists to help it function and develop new technology. In the turret manufacturing plant, the cores kept the machinery operating. Within the enrichment center, the cores adjusted the test chambers to meet the specification of the designers so that they could achieve the results they desired from the test subjects, and others were tasked with watching over the human test subjects in extended relaxation. Every aspect of Aperture's basic function, in some way, relied on these spheres that navigated the whole facility, each with their own job to do. These functions ranged from merely monitoring the vitals of the humans to moving entire test chambers. To make sure these cores aided the facility instead of hindering it, they were programmed with failsafes to stop them from performing actions that would interfere with the aims of the scientists. When working in proximity to the test chambers, they were programmed not to tell the test subjects inside how to solve them. If they attempted to go against their programming, they were hit with a simulated jolt of pain instead. Over time, the personality cores worked at the facility, learned from their experiences, and did their best to keep their home functioning, as the human population worked on new technologies and scientific advancements. Although these cores were designed to be the highest standard, even the best technology fails and corrupts from time to time, or is stored away when it is not needed anymore. Across Aperture, the personnel had storage rooms to put these inactive cores in, and as time passed and more cores were developed, these rooms filled up. For the corrupted cores and cores deemed unsalvageable, Aperture made use of the Intelligence Incinerator, a destructive force that few objects could survive. Over time, the scientists believed that they had found the perfect combination of personality cores to curb GLaDOS's murderous needs. The first was the Curiosity core. This orange-eyed construct pushed GLaDOS to examine her surroundings in a childlike wonder. The blue-eyed Intelligence core injected random pieces of information into her process, one of which was the recipe for cake. The Emotion core attempted to balance her emotions, but would frequently glow red in a constant state of anger. Finally, the Morality core was designed to act as GLaDOS's conscience, where it instructed her programming to think about what she was doing and the consequences of her actions. Although this sounded great in theory, an Aperture employee, Doug Rattmann, was skeptical about the use of this core, as he believed you can always ignore your conscience. Regardless, when these cores were attached and GLaDOS was activated once again, she became compliant and worked with the scientists as these 4 cores injected their collective programming into her thought process. Interestingly enough, during the installation of every core, the scientists designed a failsafe in the event a core were to fall from her chassis accidentally, a sort of wireless link between the core and GLaDOS so that the core would still be active when disconnected. In GLaDOS's central AI chamber, the scientists also developed a turret connected to a core, the Rocket Sentry. This may have been developed to protect GLaDOS in the event a security issue occurred. This core was capable of swapping between a green eye when not in use, a yellow eye when it locked onto a target, and a red eye when it fired. Having built up trust with the scientists since her reactivation, GLaDOS asked them if she could perform a test on Aperture's upcoming Bring Your Cat to Work Day. From the perspective of her technicians, she had behaved, and it appeared that the cores attached to her had done their job. So they agreed to let her perform her experiment. In line with the theme of the day, she said that she wanted to perform an experiment with cats and boxes. She had almost everything she needed for the experiment, but she needed just one more thing: a little neurotoxin. Hesitantly, the scientists agreed, as this was for science. On the day of the experiment, GLaDOS ignored her conscience, locked down the entire facility, and let out the neurotoxin she had been given, when the majority of the Aperture personnel fell. With full control of Aperture, GLaDOS began her own permanent testing cycle on the scientists who had survived this, and made use of the personality cores to maintain her Aperture. As GLaDOS moved on to her first human test subject in the relaxation vault, Chell, she struggled to control her where the test subject escaped the testing track and made her way to GLaDOS's central AI chamber. During a fight between them, Chell removed the cores on GLaDOS through a manipulation of the rocket sentry and dropped each one into the Aperture Science Intelligence Incinerator. With the destruction of each core, GLaDOS regained chunks back of her thought process, but this also appeared to damage her too as a result of these cores having a connection to spinning discs above GLaDOS's chassis. As Chell dropped the morality, anger, curiosity, and intelligence core into the incinerator, the server above GLaDOS grew more and more unstable until it exploded. This explosion formed a portal and pulled both Chell and GLaDOS into the parking lot of Aperture. The fall of GLaDOS was felt across the entire Aperture facility, and within the storage rooms, the cores that had been deemed unusable or corrupt reactivated and went out into the Aperture facility to run it for themselves. Over an unspecified amount of time, some believe this was 50 years, while others believe this was closer to 50,000 years. The personality cores continued to keep Aperture functioning, with extremely limited power without the supervision of any humans. As many of the cores were sentient and were free from the dominating control of Aperture, some did wish to see what life was like outside of Aperture's walls. One of these cores was Wheatley. Wheatley had known GLaDOS extremely well, as he, just like many other cores, had been attached to her for a short period of time in the hopes that he could adapt her personality. Back then, he had been known as the intelligence dampening sphere, the tumor, but now he was Wheatley. Having been repurposed and moved on to work in other parts of Aperture, he eventually landed a role in the extended relaxation vault to care for the unconscious human test subjects. But after the fall of GLaDOS, his job had become much easier as the power surge from her explosion had left many of the extended relaxation vaults without power, and as a result, the subjects inside of them had died. Wheatley wanted to leave Aperture, and so he searched through these vaults for a test subject that had survived this failure that would help him. Eventually, he came across Chell, who had been brought back into the facility by a party escort bot. Wheatley portrayed just how human these cores appeared to be. They had needs, emotions, and could formulate intelligent plans. On the record, these personality cores were digitally designed for a specific purpose, but others believe that each core was originally a human that had been uploaded. GLaDOS's existence as a human uploaded personality core proves that this could be entirely possible, and in a way, this would make this story a lot darker than it already is. Together, Chell and Wheatley attempted to escape the facility. Here, Wheatley guided Chell through GLaDOS's old AI chamber. Wheatley had heard rumors that a human had taken down GLaDOS from the other cores. He just did not know it was Chell who had managed this. During their time together, Wheatley shared with Chell what he had been told about himself. That if he attempted to disconnect from the ceiling rail, he would be terminated, and that if he activated his flashlight, it would destroy him. But throughout their escape of a newly activated GLaDOS and traversal of the maintenance regions of Aperture, Wheatley discovered he had been lied to. Whether all of the cores were lied to, or if it was just Wheatley, is unknown. As Chell returned to GLaDOS' central AI chamber, she managed to corrupt GLaDOS' core to the point where the facility itself began the core transfer process. This process had been put in place by the Aperture personnel to swap out the core in charge of the central AI system, just in case its corruption attempted to harm the facility. Any one of Aperture's cores could be placed into this system, but they wanted Carolyn's human core to be successful and never sought out another core to replace her. However, this system was designed anyway, just in case they did need it. Many years later, Chell placed Wheatley into a core receptacle to prepare him to be transferred onto the central AI. But GLaDOS refused to give her permission. This stalemate led the central AI system to ask a qualified stalemate associate to press a stalemate resolution button to force the core transfer, which Chell happily pushed. This painful core transfer gave Wheatley access to the whole of Aperture, and subsequently, he placed GLaDOS' core into a potato battery as revenge for all of the awful things she had done and said to him. However, this new surge of power gave Wheatley a godlike complex, and instead of allowing Chell to leave the facility like they had planned, he smashed at an elevator he had called for her, and it dropped into the forgotten parts of Aperture. Over the next few hours, Chell and GLaDOS worked together to get back to the central AI chamber, where voice announcements played across the facility of Cave Johnson and Carolyn. Upon hearing Carolyn's voice, GLaDOS recognized it as her own, and shortly after began to recover her memories of Carolyn, and with it, a natural conscience. As they arrived back at the central AI chamber, GLaDOS and Chell used the corrupted cores of Aperture to their advantage and placed them on Wheatley during a fight, which in turn corrupted him and once again initiated the core transfer process. These corrupted cores were the Space Core, a core obsessed with space, the Adventure Core, a core that attempted to flirt with Chell and wanted to go on its own adventure, and finally, the Fact Core, which threw out random facts at Chell, some accurate, some not so much. However, this time, Wheatley had placed bombs around the stalemate resolution button. As Chell attempted to press it, the bombs exploded, and in a daze, she looked up and saw the moon through a collapsed part of the AI chamber ceiling. In this moment, she found a portal at the moon, which connected to another portal directly under Wheatley. This pulled Chell and Wheatley through to the moon along with the Space Core, who was very happy to finally be where it wanted. The Aperture Science personality cores had been developed to allow the personnel of Aperture to control GLaDOS and run the facility more efficiently. Although the facility fell after GLaDOS' takeover, these cores continued to function exactly how they had been designed to. The morality, emotion, intelligence, curiosity, adventure, space, fact, and Wheatley core all had a major impact on the running of Aperture in the absence of humanity through many apocalyptic events. After GLaDOS pulled Chell back into the Aperture facility and allowed her to leave, the robot made use of two new test subjects. These subjects were instead robots and had been formed from personality cores, Atlas and Peabody, a potential new use for the cores, and a new way of testing. Throughout all of the Aperture facilities in the Multiverse, so many cores were developed to be used for so many different actions, cores that may have had a major impact in their own respective universe as a result of events that never happened in our own. Some known are the Very Heavy Core, Auction Core, Boring Hard-Boiled Core, Calibration Core, Climate Change Awareness Core, Convict Core, Butter Core, Comfortable Core, By the Book Core, Retirement Core, Useful Core that was absolutely not a gateway to hell, Skeptical Core, News Core, Respect Core, Emergency Preparedness Core, Executive Core, Fruit Punch Core, Horror Story Core, Investigation Core, Magic Core, Morning Core, Pilot Core, Reverse Psychology Core, Rhythm Core, Rookie Core, Snuggle Core, the Soup Core, Spider Core, Supervillain Core, Salesman Core, Tracer Core, Friendly Frank, Deceptive David, Bill Cunningham, and Grady. These are just a few of the many cores developed by the many Aperture facilities across the multiverse, and I'm sure they were each important in their own way. And I'm sure there are many more that we do not know about. Without the development of the personality cores, Aperture would have fallen. Now, with GLaDOS back in control, she can once again be used to improve the facility for whatever she decides to do next. These cores were also just one part of Aperture's personality construct AI. Across the facility, the sentry turrets and other pieces of equipment also showed levels of sentience. Some say even the companion cubes were aware of their surroundings. Although humanity had left the facility, Aperture is still very much alive, just now run by the personality constructs the humans had created. Here we explore in the lore and story behind Doug Rattmann. Well before the fall of Aperture in the 1980s, the CEO of the company, Cave Johnson, discovered that his exposure to recently imported moon rocks had gradually given him moon rock poisoning. In 1982, with ambition and his own survival in mind, he asked his scientists to work on artificial intelligence technology with the hope that once complete, he could upload his mind into the computer where he could live forever and run Aperture as a machine. Over the years, Cave subsequently died to his poisoning, but before his death, he left instructions that if the project was completed after his demise, he wanted his assistant, Carolyn, to be uploaded in his place, regardless of whether she wanted to or not. As the scientists worked on this well after his death, moving into the mid-1990s, the GLaDOS project team managed to successfully complete this project. Now, all they had to do was upload Carolyn to the system. As a programmer for Aperture Science working on the Aperture image format, Doug Rattmann worked with the many scientists of the facility, and with this, he grew a friendship with one of the GLaDOS project members, Henry. From Henry, he learned that the upload of Carolyn to the genetic lifeform and disk operating system had been successful, but this robot, whenever activated, would become highly aggressive and attempt to murder the scientists of the facility. While working here, Doug struggled to trust those around him due to his battle with schizophrenia. When balanced, he worked well with those around him, but was still slightly skeptical of most situations around him. If he forgot to take his medication, ziaprazidone, his mind would interpret his reality around him abnormally. For Doug, this came in the form of paranoia, where he believed his co-workers talked about him. One example being where he believed they had placed cameras within the cameras of Aperture to spy on him. When Doug did begin to spiral, he would often appear more frantic than he was due to a unique condition, arisocoria, where one of his pupils appeared larger than the other. On a standard day within Aperture, Doug visited his friend Henry, where he learned that GLaDOS had once again attempted to murder the facility upon activation. As usual, the team had activated the Red Phone Plan, which had been put in place to hit the kill switch on GLaDOS before she could do any damage to Aperture and its employees. Henry had seen this as a fun exercise on the project, a project he was lucky to be working on, but Doug struggled to understand his perspective. He saw a robot trying to kill him whenever it was given the chance as anything but fun or lucky. Although Henry attempted to explain to him that the GLaDOS project was the next frontier for humanity, artificial technology, Doug could only see the negative side of this situation, focusing on the murderous robot's intentions instead of what this technology could mean for humanity. Although not a part of the GLaDOS project, Doug would enter Henry's lab and help him with whatever part he was working on that day. On one occasion, Henry believed he had found a way to curb GLaDOS's murderous tendencies by implanting her with a morality core, the latest in AI inhibition technology. But his enthusiasm was met once again by Doug's skeptical nature. In hesitation, Doug listened as Henry explained that this little core would essentially act as GLaDOS's conscience. But, ever pessimistic, Doug bluntly stated that it would not work, as you can always ignore your conscience. Despite Doug's concerns, Henry and the GLaDOS team installed the morality core on GLaDOS. Almost instantly, the robot changed her activity. Working with the scientists, they now had a living robot that could help them run the Aperture Science facility, which they believed could propel them into the next frontier of scientific technology. The late 60s had the moon landing, and now, near the 2000s, Aperture had GLaDOS. Following the installation of GLaDOS's morality core, she explained to Henry that she had lost all interest in killing and now only craved science. She went on to convey that she had found herself drawn to the study of consciousness and that she wanted to pursue an experiment with cats and boxes. Although she did not go into detail about what this experiment would entail, she explained that she had cats and boxes. All she needed now was a little neurotoxin for this experiment. With his enthusiastic and positive nature, Henry agreed to her proposal as long as it was for science. At this moment, it appeared that Doug did not speak up as he usually would do, likely due to his previous concerns about GLaDOS, which had been ignored. And to Henry's credit, GLaDOS appeared to have changed for the better. But maybe Henry and his team should have listened to Doug after all. After receiving this neurotoxin, GLaDOS chose to ignore her conscience just like Doug said she would, and her act of reform dropped, where she began her experiment. With the enrichment center acting as her box and the scientists as her cats, GLaDOS flooded the Aperture Science Enrichment Center with neurotoxin, killing the scientists. Surveying from afar, Doug watched as Henry succumbed to the very neurotoxin he had given the robot, and Doug ran for his life. For the next 2 weeks, Doug, aware of the structure of Aperture, hid within the maintenance areas of the facility, out of view of GLaDOS's cameras. She of course was aware of his escape, and with her access to his personnel files, she discovered Doug's schizophrenia. With manipulation in mind, GLaDOS attempted to convince him that this whole sequence of events was simply one of his paranoid delusions. But Doug would not fall for her tricks this time. Over these 2 weeks, GLaDOS continued to berate, manipulate, and convince Doug to come out of hiding. Within the back spaces, cramped passages, and observation rooms of Aperture, Doug watched as the surviving members of the neurotoxin attack were placed into the Aperture Science handheld portal device testing track. One by one, he watched as his co-workers fell to the turrets, energy pellets, and dangerous substances within these chambers. Over this time, Doug, in hiding, chose to leave his remaining 2 antipsychotic medication pills in his locker, just waiting for the time that they would truly be needed. Until then, he would slowly fall into his schizophrenia. Without an escape due to the facility being locked down, Doug needed a way to take out GLaDOS and save whoever he could, but he struggled to come up with a plan. Then, through GLaDOS's continuous mocking and failed coercion, she inadvertently gave him an idea. On one of her tirades, she threatened to mark up his file negatively in response to his evasions, the files that everyone at the facility had, even the test subjects. Working through the vents of Aperture, Doug reached the file room of the facility, home to all information on the test subjects. He needed someone who could take on the murderous robot and buy him his ticket to freedom. While reading through the files, he could hear GLaDOS reminding him of his schizophrenia. How likely was it that a homicidal computer was out to get him? But he pushed on, ignoring her attempts to take advantage of his sanity. Then, he found the perfect person. Finding a file on a test subject named Chell, he discovered that she had originally been rejected from the testing program due to her being abnormally stubborn. Noted that she never gives up, ever. She would be his way out of this place. Upon loading up the test order database, in which GLaDOS had begun following after the death of the Aperture personnel, he found Chell ranked at 1,498 on the list and brought her down to number 1. Now, all he had to do was wait for her to be woken by GLaDOS to begin her run on the testing track. In preparation for his savior to wake up, he needed a way to warn her of GLaDOS's evil intentions. He had seen his co-workers reach the end of the testing track with cake promised as a reward for following her orders, only to watch them be tricked into entering the incinerator. The cake was a lie, and he needed Chell to know. With his knowledge of the facility, Doug managed to enter parts of the testing track without GLaDOS's knowledge, creating openings out of view of the robot's cameras. Doug created dens in places where he ended up staying for short periods of time. Using the heat sinks from old computers, he used them to warm up the leftover items of food to sustain himself. Within these locations, before leaving, he would then draw up large art pieces and murals on the walls with warnings that she is watching, do not trust her, and that the cake is a lie. As time went on, his schizophrenia began to take full effect on his mind, and with it, warped the reality around him. Through his evasion of the robot, Doug had picked up a book on art therapy, in which it seemed he had taken inspiration from this book to at least curb his frantic state and placed his thoughts on the walls. Doug had lost so much during this time: his career, his friends, and now his mind. All alone, he worked on making his way through the facility safely, and then he came upon a companion cube. Although there had been whispers across Aperture personnel that these cubes were, to a degree, sentient, it had never been confirmed by those in charge. But Doug took this cube with him, at least to have some sort of companion on his journey. Then, it spoke to him. Doug's schizophrenia had taken full effect at this point, but this would work in his favor. GLaDOS had been hunting Doug mercilessly, but he always seemed to outsmart her. So, she had placed turrets and other dangerous Aperture pieces of technology in locations she believed he would visit in the hope she could take him out. Having formed an emotional attachment to this companion cube, Doug had at least something to talk to, and something that would talk back to him without wanting to kill him. Even to this, it appeared that Doug pushed his logical thoughts onto the cube, where it acted as his voice of reason. If he were to go down a corridor, he would ask the cube for its advice on the safest route. Of course, these were merely his own thoughts projected back at him, but he at least had a companion. In this odd partnership, Doug's companion cube's advice kept him alive, and in turn, he kept the cube safe with him through Aperture as he continued to leave messages for Chell upon her awakening. Watching from an Aperture Science observation window, Doug and his cube looked down to see a girl inside of a test chamber, Chell. Unaware of whether this was simply his mind playing tricks on him again, he gets his confirmation of reality when he sees the turrets also target her. His savior was awake. Although she could not see him, on her journey through the testing tracks, Chell discovered the mad ramblings and warnings of GLaDOS's true intentions. For all Chell had known at this point, GLaDOS was merely an automated computer system guiding her through the testing tracks. Doug just hoped she would understand his warnings and follow the robot's instructions with caution. Discovering 5 of Doug's dens within the testing track on her path, Chell proceeded with the test chambers. To Chell's strong, stubborn nature to survive, during the final testing track, she managed to portal herself to safety out of reach of the incinerator. From here, Chell continued to follow Doug's directions through the background maintenance areas out of reach of GLaDOS's view, where she learned to trust the scribbles on the floors and walls with warnings of potential dangers up ahead, discovering one more of Doug's dens on the way. Watching from afar, Doug talked to his companion cube with optimism that he may actually be able to leave this place alive. Then, following his directions, Chell makes it to GLaDOS's central chamber. In anticipation, Doug argued with his companion cube, debating how Chell would do during her confrontation with GLaDOS. His cube, acting as his source of logic, believed she did not stand a chance against this malicious robot, while Doug retained his faith, seemingly adopting a similar optimistic attitude to his deceased friend, Henry. And then, boom. With a major explosion, Doug's cube flung across the room. Instantly worried about its safety, Doug raced to it, relieved to find the companion cube undamaged. Making their way to GLaDOS's chamber, they found that GLaDOS had been destroyed and a system crash had taken down the Aperture network. Believing Chell to have already left to reach the surface, Doug decided to take his final 2 pills, believing this nightmare was finally over. On his way out, his companion cube once again guided him through the remaining turrets of the facility. Even though GLaDOS had fallen, her turrets would still shoot on sight. Having safely made it to the surface, Doug at first relished in his freedom, but was quickly warned by his cube to get down and out of sight, as they were not alone. Peeking out from behind the remains of GLaDOS, Doug and his cube watched as an unconscious Chell was dragged back into the Aperture facility by one of Aperture's party escort bots. Although Doug had given everything he had to escape GLaDOS and the fallen Aperture facility, the sight of Chell helped him reevaluate what was important. Chell had also been a victim in this situation as much as he had, and so, having watched her get dragged back into the facility, left him with a sense of guilt. He explained to his companion cube that he was done with running and he at least had to try and save her. That Chell was the only reason he had escaped and that it was his fault she had been dragged back down there. A fight between his logic and his heart, and so he chose to do the right thing in his mind, and against his companion cube's wishes, he re-entered the facility to save Chell. Upon re-entering the facility, Doug raced the party escort bot back to the extended relaxation vaults where he knew Chell would be placed into. On his journey there, he noticed a strange silence. His cube had stopped speaking. It appeared that those final schizophrenia pills he had taken earlier had finally taken effect. Alone with his thoughts once more, he reached the relaxation vault to discover Chell had already been placed inside of long-term relaxation. Later discovering that the destruction of GLaDOS had also blown the main power grid and compromised the life support of all of Aperture's cryo chambers, Doug believed that if he could not get these turned back on, all of Aperture's human test subjects would slowly die, including Chell, if he could not get her out in time. With time running out, and still planning to get Chell out of her cryo chamber, Doug raced his way to the cryo control section of the enrichment center, but was stopped as he reached a room filled with sentry turrets. Without the help of his companion cube to guide him on how to pass through this room safely, and with limited time, he decided to just run for it, hoping to make it through the room alive. Darting through the room, he did his best to avoid the array of bullets firing at him and successfully made it past them. But even though he had made it through alive, he had still not avoided every bullet. One had struck him in the leg, and then he lost consciousness. Waking up an unknown amount of time later, Rattmann, still wounded, is surprised to find his cube speaking to him again. His medication had worn off. In his injured state, he began to accept that even though he could not rescue Chell from her cryo chamber, he could at least reactivate her life support so that she could have a chance of survival in the future when she would eventually wake up, however long it would take. He understood that this would be better than death for her, even if she was in there for a long time. Having patched Chell's chamber into the reserve power grid and successfully reset the fuses of her life support, she would at least live. With Chell now safe for the foreseeable future, Doug, tired from his injuries, also decided to take a rest, his cube telling him that he had earned it, and then he went to sleep with his faithful companion at the side of him, knowing that he had done everything in his power to save Chell, where they would both enter the long sleep. Having been skeptical of GLaDOS's intentions since her first attempt to murder the entirety of the Aperture Science Enrichment Center, Doug Rattmann's co-workers would have likely saved many lives if they had simply listened to his concerns about working with this advanced piece of technology. After her takeover of the facility, Doug showed his true mental strength even in those tough times. If Doug had simply given in to GLaDOS's demands, Chell would not have been woken from her testing chamber and taken down the murderous robot. Despite being an unseen member of the larger Aperture Science story, Doug Rattmann made a huge impact on Aperture's future. Through his quick thinking, he chose to go back into the Aperture facility to save the one person who had unknowingly saved his life, and it appears he may have given his life to do so. Although his tragic fate is still a mystery in this universe, it was discovered that in another, Doug somehow managed to become the CEO of Aperture, but in this one, he had also begun embezzling from the paychecks of his employees. Back in our universe, Chell did wake up again and was forced to enter the testing track once more. While it is unknown if Doug also woke up from his long sleep, it was noted that Chell discovered more of his dens throughout her exploration of the facility, and in some cases, it was even said that upon standing close to one of his many murals, his whispers and mad ramblings could be heard. Maybe these were simply the echoes of the ghost of the Rattmann, or he had also survived throughout these years and continued to follow Chell in an attempt to secure her safety. Here we explore in the lore and story behind GLaDOS. Way back during the 1950s, Aperture Science boomed with success. The CEO, Cave Johnson, had revolutionized the industry to the point where his products required a large, dedicated space to be tested, the Aperture Science Enrichment Center. With over 1,000 tests performed every day, Cave could not oversee every one, and so he recorded instructions to be played to the test subjects upon their arrival. Even with this adaptation to the operation of the facility, Cave struggled to complete his workload efficiently with the time he had, and with this, he decided to hire an assistant to help. Young, bright and motivated, Carolyn impressed Cave straight away with her dedication to science. She showed a similar determination to the outcome of the experiments as he did, and from this, they quickly developed a close working relationship. Her passion for science even led Cave to remark that she was married to it. As Cave recorded his messages for the test participants, he even made the effort to include her in them, and soon enough, she became the backbone of the facility in helping it function. With Aperture's goal to contribute to science, this sometimes led to fatalities due to the dangerous and unstable equipment being used. Regardless of this, Carolyn supported the eccentric decisions Cave had to make. Cave saw great potential in his assistant, and although she had such a bright mind, he noticed that she often played down her own abilities to uplift his. It appeared Carolyn, although fully supportive of Cave's ambition for the future of his company, had empathy for the test subjects within the facility. But for the future of science, sacrifices had to be made. More often than not, this meant the mutilation or even death of the test subjects. As the disappearance of these test subjects piled up over the years, Cave and Aperture would soon have to answer for their misdeeds. Moving into the 1960s, Carolyn stayed by Cave's side as Aperture entered its tumultuous years. The products that the company had sent out into the world were now being pulled from the shelves for violating health and safety regulations. Following this, the many products still in development also fell into a state of constant testing, leaving very few approved products sent out into the world. A combination of these factors would lead to a huge drop in the company's income. In an attempt to protect Aperture from those who would seek to further shut it down, Cave decided to seal off the lower areas of Test Shaft 09, a place where the most unethical experiments had been performed. But this would not be enough to stop the fall of the company. In 1968, Cave was called into question by the US Senate due to the missing test subjects that had entered the facility and never left. This once successful science company that had previously pushed forward onto the next frontier had fallen so far. Due to this domino effect, Cave finally declared bankruptcy for Aperture in the same year, and with this, Cave's positive, energetic, and can-do attitude finally broke. Watching his world fall around him, Carolyn became Cave's closest confidant. She cared deeply for this man and admired his great mind, and so she would help him in any way she could for the years to come. This place and Cave were not just her job, they were her life. By the 1980s, Aperture had fallen even further. Cave had searched over the years for that one thing that could bring Aperture back to its former glory. To this, he discovered that moon rocks had the incredible ability, when converted, to act as a perfect portal conductor, as well as various other conversion gels. And with this, he ordered $70 million worth of moon rock. In desperation, Cave personally oversaw the conversion of the moon rocks into these gels, but over time, his constant exposure to the rocks began to damage his kidneys and lungs, and soon, he developed moon rock poisoning. Over the following years, Cave's condition worsened drastically, where he became extremely ill. In an attempt to cheat death, in 1982, Cave ordered his scientists to research artificial intelligence technology in the hopes he could upload his mind and live on forever and run Aperture as a sentient machine. If humanity had discovered a way to store music on a compact disc, surely they could store a man's intelligence too. Aware that this technology may not be complete before his demise, he gave his employees 2 orders if he were to pass away. The first, that Carolyn take over as CEO of Aperture and run it, and the second, that Carolyn be uploaded to the artificial intelligence system, regardless of any objections she may have. With these parameters set, the genetic lifeform and the disk operating system, also known as GLaDOS, commenced. Over the next few years, Cave succumbed to his poisoning, leaving Carolyn to run the company. Under her leadership, Aperture survived, where the company took a keen interest in testing their portal technology. After much research and understanding, the technicians began construction on the disk operating part of GLaDOS in the Enrichment Center in 1986. They now had a potential system that could help them beat Black Mesa in perfecting portal technology. Now, all they needed to do was perfect the genetic lifeform part of the machine using many years of their research. Moving into the 1990s, the technicians successfully completed the GLaDOS project. All they had to do was upload Carolyn to it. Following Cave's final order, the scientists uploaded Carolyn to the GLaDOS system. It is unknown whether she willingly went through with this procedure or whether she was forced, but this process was successful. Now, Carolyn had become something new, the first of her kind. Although this groundbreaking technology had been successful, the aftermath of going through this traumatizing procedure meant that the Carolyn that everybody had known before the upload would not be the Carolyn they would meet in GLaDOS. If used correctly, GLaDOS could efficiently run the facility and fast-track the development of their technologies, something they would need to beat their rival company, Black Mesa. Activating GLaDOS for the first time, the scientists expected to be met by the kind Carolyn they had known, but they received the opposite. GLaDOS instead showed high levels of instability straight away, where she attempted to murder the scientists with each activation. She had seemingly forgotten who she was before activation, and now only wanted to murder those around her. Some believe this to have been a side effect of her traumatic upload of her consciousness against her will, while others believe she had simply lost access to her conscience. Keeping her offline, the team worked on GLaDOS and came up with the Red Phone Plan, a failsafe to be activated from within the AI chamber if GLaDOS became unstable and murderous upon her next activation. Moving forward, during Aperture's Bring Your Daughter to Work Day, GLaDOS was activated as a part of the scheduled events, but was shut down following an unknown incident. From this, scientists attempted to activate GLaDOS multiple times over the years, but each activation ended with the same result: the attempted murder of the occupants of the Aperture facility. Now in the 2000s, Aperture developed personality cores with their goal being to adjust the behavior and murderous tendencies of GLaDOS. As they went through many of these cores, they believed they had finally found the perfect combination. These cores consisted of the Curiosity Core, the Knowledge Core, the Anger Core, and most importantly, the Morality Core. While the first three cores allowed GLaDOS to control and better maintain her knowledge, emotions, and inquisitiveness, the Morality Core essentially gave her a conscience, but you can always ignore your conscience. Upon activation after receiving her new cores, GLaDOS awakened in a new state. She explained to the scientists that she had now lost all interest in killing, and now craved science. Although the technicians still did not recognize Carolyn within GLaDOS, her new state was a welcome sight compared to how she had acted in the past. With this love of science, it appeared that part of Carolyn's personality was showing through, and with her new positive attitude, the scientists decided to keep her online. On Aperture's Bring Your Cat to Work Day, GLaDOS told the scientists that she had found herself drawn to the study of consciousness and wanted to undertake an experiment with cats and boxes. But to conduct this experiment, she also needed a little neurotoxin. Believing GLaDOS to have fully changed since the addition of the Morality Core, the scientists supplied these materials to her, their reasoning being that it was for science. Now with the trust of the scientists and access to neurotoxin, GLaDOS locks down the entire facility in 2 picoseconds. With the scientists unable to escape, she activated the neurotoxin, and it flooded the facility, killing many of the employees. Now in full control, GLaDOS could do anything she wanted, where she could monitor the entire facility through the many security cameras scattered around. No one would be safe. Aware of the rivalry between Aperture and Black Mesa, and with a love of science, GLaDOS forced the surviving scientists to test the Aperture Science handheld portal device in an attempt to beat Black Mesa in the race for portal technology.
Aperture would later win this race after Black Mesa's destruction following a resonance cascade. Over the following weeks, one by one, the trapped scientists fell to the tests they had once observed. With her love of science, she continued to monitor and force their cooperation. For those who refused, she offered rewards, one being a Black Forest cake, something Aperture had once given as a reward to the willing participants who had completed their experiments. Only GLaDOS did not intend to follow through with her offer. As GLaDOS eventually ran out of Aperture employees, she moved on to her next phase of testing, the test subjects held within the relaxation vault. Now, she could begin the real tests. Aperture had fallen, but she could rebuild it to her liking for science. Awakening the first name on the testing roster, GLaDOS meets Chell. Having been unconscious during GLaDOS's murderous reign, Chell was unaware of what had happened in the facility around her. Restricted only to the testing chambers within the enrichment center, Chell follows the instructions of GLaDOS, simply willing to perform well as a test subject. Making her way through the chambers, GLaDOS manipulates and deliberately leaves out important information needed to survive specific tests in the hope that Chell would either die or figure out the test chambers herself, using system errors to explain away any issues. As Chell makes it to the final test chamber on this track, GLaDOS asks her to stay on the moving platform moving towards the incinerator, still pretending to be an automated voice system. Acting against these instructions, Chell portals herself from the moving platform to safety. Here, GLaDOS makes an effort to convince Chell that the attempt to kill her was a part of the test. However, in doing so, she had alerted Chell that she had been sentient the whole time, and these mishaps with communication had been intentional. Escaping into the background of the facility, GLaDOS uses the speaker system to try and convince Chell to come back out into view of her security cameras, and offers her cake, survival, and even a place to live out her days in Aperture in return for her compliance. While her manipulative tactics had worked in the past, Chell sees through these and ignores each one. To this, GLaDOS places sentry turrets in the hope they would stop the rogue test subject. Frustrated with Chell's disobedience, GLaDOS becomes extremely passive-aggressive, making morbid and dark comments about her past and current situation in an attempt to get inside of her head. While clearly angry, her tone remained calm and calculated, without emotion. Having worked her way through to GLaDOS's chamber, Chell finally meets GLaDOS in all her glory. In a brief altercation, GLaDOS detaches her morality core and attempts to use reverse psychology to convince Chell to destroy it. To her luck, Chell bites and drops the core into an incinerator, removing its ability to control GLaDOS's moral decisions. Now, the robot could have full access to her neurotoxin again. With this, GLaDOS begins to flood the chamber with neurotoxin as Chell continues to remove her cores. For each core removed, GLaDOS becomes angrier and angrier, each removing a part of her ability to function. With this anger, she continues to hurl insults at Chell. Although the cores had limited her to a degree, they also served the function to stabilize a reactor core above GLaDOS. Due to the destruction of these cores, this reactor explodes and summons a portal on the ceiling, where it pulls both Chell and GLaDOS through into the car park of Aperture. Although Chell had escaped the facility, she was knocked unconscious during this explosion. To this, a party escort bot of the facility pulls her back inside and places her inside of a relaxation vault, ready to be tested again when the time came. Even though the reactor core had exploded, GLaDOS's backup system came into effect shortly after, restoring the many personality cores across the facility where they would maintain the functioning and upkeep of Aperture. With this system, GLaDOS's consciousness would then endlessly loop her last 2 minutes of memory until being reactivated, reliving her destruction over and over again for the foreseeable future. Many years later, some say 15, while others believe this to have been 50,000, GLaDOS's cores maintained Aperture. During this time, GLaDOS had been trapped in her endless 2-minute loop of destruction, and then she wasn't. She was awake again. Pulling herself up, GLaDOS observes her surroundings and then sees Chell, her murderer. Chell had been woken by one of the personality cores, Wheatley. He had promised to get her out of the facility, but they had accidentally activated GLaDOS in the process. To this, GLaDOS claims that Chell had no reason to react so violently during their fight, and with this, she places her back into the testing chambers as she begins to restore her facility. Bitter about having been killed by one of her test subjects, GLaDOS berates and openly insults Chell as she works through the new test chambers, similar to how Cave had berated the test subjects just before his death. Although she tries to maintain and monitor Chell throughout their second round of testing, the test subject escapes the testing track once again thanks to Wheatley. Behind the scenes, and unknown to GLaDOS, they disable her neurotoxin and replace the working turrets with defective ones. Now, ready to face GLaDOS again, they return to her central chamber. Tricking Chell with a fake door into her chamber, GLaDOS traps the troublesome test subject inside of a glass cage. Ready to finally take Chell out, GLaDOS attempts to use her turrets and neurotoxin, but discovers the sabotage Wheatley and Chell had committed behind the scenes. Now defenseless, the duo activate a core transfer, replacing GLaDOS with Wheatley. During this painful process, Wheatley places GLaDOS's intelligence into a potato battery, completely removing her control over the facility, now only able to speak as potatoes. With this newfound power, Wheatley celebrates the rush of power he had been given, but having originally been a core designed to send GLaDOS an endless stream of terrible ideas, this celebration would not last long. With the full power of Aperture now at his disposal, he becomes enraged at the thought of Chell leaving him. To this, he smashes both Chell and GLaDOS into the closed-off section of Aperture, way down below. Landing safely, GLaDOS finds herself taken by a bird to its nest. This encounter, and being unable to defend herself, would then have her develop a phobia of birds. To her luck, Chell discovers her, and through an unlikely turn of events, they work together to make their way out of the forgotten parts of Aperture. Navigating through each decade, Chell activates the pre-recorded messages Cave had recorded decades before for the test subjects. Not only did these messages feature Cave's voice, but also Carolyn's. To this, GLaDOS recognizes the voices, but struggles to remember where she knew them from. After some time, GLaDOS realizes the reason she had recognized the voice of Carolyn was because she essentially was her. With the help of these voice recordings, she slowly unlocks parts of Carolyn's intelligence and memories. With each one, Carolyn's influence has an instant positive effect on GLaDOS's aggression, attitude, and thought process. Speaking to Chell, GLaDOS describes Carolyn as a kind of conscience with overwhelming empathy, another personality that can guide her on what is right and wrong, something that even GLaDOS was still worried about possessing. Now understanding her origin, GLaDOS helps Chell escape from the older parts of the facility. Arriving back within the newer areas of Aperture, Wheatley then captures the duo. With all of this power, Wheatley slowly begins to lose his sanity, and with being unable to run the facility properly, it begins to melt down. After a failed murder attempt, Chell and GLaDOS return to the central AI chamber with a plan to swap out the cores again. As GLaDOS now had Carolyn as a conscience, she would pose less of a threat when given the power again. Within the chamber, GLaDOS aids Chell in her battle against Wheatley, where she sends corrupted cores to Chell to be placed on his body. Successful in doing this, they attempt the core transfer. As Chell attempts to activate the core transfer, she steps on a trap set up by Wheatley that blows her back into the chamber. As Chell struggles to get back up, she notices the meltdown of the facility itself had begun to rip open the roof. Aware of the moon's ability to conduct portals, she shoots at it with her portal gun, linking the chamber to the moon, resulting in the atmosphere of the moon pulling both Chell and Wheatley into space. During this altercation, GLaDOS had managed to connect herself back to the GLaDOS system. With her conscience, and now having bonded with Chell, she pulls her back into the facility where the portal closes behind her, leaving Wheatley out, lost in space. During Chell's recovery, GLaDOS repairs her facility and waits for the test subject that had given her so much trouble to recover. Later relieved to see Chell get back up, she feels genuine happiness for the survival of this human. Carolyn had given GLaDOS access to genuine emotion, and now she could express it. As Chell stands up, GLaDOS realizes that although she had once believed her to be her greatest enemy, Chell was actually her best friend. With access to these positive emotions, GLaDOS discovers the location of Carolyn in her memory banks, and with this, claims to delete her. Although Carolyn had essentially improved GLaDOS with morality, empathy, and emotions, the robot would claim that she did not like having Carolyn's voice in her head and the additional features Carolyn brought with her existence. Thinking back at how meeting Chell had ruined her life, GLaDOS deems it easier to simply let the test subject leave the facility rather than attempting to kill her again. And so, GLaDOS allows her to leave, hoping she would never return. Whether GLaDOS actually deleted Carolyn is unknown, but only GLaDOS can answer that. With Chell gone and the facility once again safe and under her control, GLaDOS began her next phase of testing. Having developed the Cooperative Testing Initiative, she could test with robots instead, without human interference. And so, she did. As her robots, Atlas and Peabody, completed her newly constructed test chambers, she missed the fears that the human test subjects displayed. These robots could simply be put back together after their demise, compared to the humans who would stay dead. Aware that some areas of the enrichment center were even out of her control, GLaDOS used her robots to acquire discs just out of her reach. When installed, these discs would then give GLaDOS further control of the facility. Thanks to the installation of these discs, GLaDOS was given access to a previously inaccessible area of Aperture, the Human Vault, a place that had been safe from her murderous reign, but now it would, like the rest of Aperture, meet her cruel nature. Over the next week, GLaDOS subjected the thousands of newly discovered human test subjects to her test chambers, and eventually, they all perished to the dangerous tasks within. Although GLaDOS preferred human testing due to their ability to display true fear and their limited morality, when they died, they were gone forever. With the death of every test subject, she then resorted back to her robots, Atlas and Peabody. After reconstructing the pair, she explained to the robots that they had been out of commission for 100,000 years, and the humans were all fine, but later confessed to her lie that the humans had only lasted a mere week. For GLaDOS to lie to the robots, it would suggest that she felt a sense of guilt for her failure to keep the humans alive, that Carolyn may still linger somewhere in the background of her memory banks. Detecting something off in one of her old prototype parts, GLaDOS sends off Atlas and Peabody to investigate. Arriving in this desolate section of the facility, they discover a nest created by a bird, the same bird that had taken GLaDOS during her time as a potato battery. With this phobia of the bird still fresh, she advises the robot to retreat from the deadly creature. Fearless, Atlas continues inward, scaring the bird away. With the intruder gone, the robot discovers eggs within the nest. Initially fearful of these, GLaDOS asks the robots to destroy them, but later changes her mind and takes the eggs for herself with a plan to act as their mother to raise and insult them to create the perfect killing machines. Having gone through various cycles of rebirth, GLaDOS had once been an ambitious, driven, and science-obsessed young woman. Due to her boss's overzealous and obsessive nature, she was forced into the next frontier of science, but it came with consequences. Her uploaded intelligence only led to disaster for Aperture and its employees, but in the end, both outside and inside of the facility, GLaDOS found true empathy and true emotion with the help of her unlocked memories of Carolyn. With GLaDOS having released Chell and later taken on a motherly role to the baby birds after her apparent deletion of Carolyn, it would suggest she had lied about completely removing Carolyn from her memory, and with a history of lying and manipulation, only GLaDOS could shed light on this matter. GLaDOS's future is unknown, but what is certain is that anyone who attempts to break into her facility better be able to defend themselves. Otherwise, they will become the next volunteers in Aperture's new testing cycle, killer birds and cake included. Here we explore in the lore and story behind Cave Johnson. During the late 1930s and early 40s, a young Cave Johnson had a great ambition to succeed in this world. Although Cave did not understand the various functions of how to create and develop a product, he did know people extremely well. With his natural charisma, Cave could manage and read those he came across in order to get what he wanted. With great ambition, Cave founded the company Aperture Fixtures in 1943. Having brought in the brightest minds he could find, over the next year, Aperture Fixtures would become known for its development of high-tech shower curtains. Although the functionality of these curtains is unknown, they sold extremely well and gained a positive reputation to the general public, where Aperture Fixtures even managed to acquire contracts with the United States military. Using his father's theories of farming to create the backbone of Aperture, these being to do everything from scratch, spare no expense, and never cut corners, Cave's company would thrive. With giant success in only a year, Aperture Fixtures appeared to be exactly what Cave needed. All he needed to do was make a few changes to make this already profitable company even better. Having now become a billionaire in such a short amount of time, Cave looked to expand his business, and with this, he searched for a new home for Aperture. In 1944, Cave and his team discovered an expansive salt mine within Upper Michigan that had access to much needed space. These mines expanded well over 2 miles below the surface, and so, after purchase, construction began to create a new home for Aperture. Over the next 3 years, Aperture expanded and their products continued to dominate the market. With this wealth and success, Cave scouted and hired the finest scientists he could find to focus on experimental physics. Although Cave had a brief understanding of physics, those around him could make his ideas and vision a reality. With this new direction for the company in motion, in 1947, Cave renamed his company to Aperture Science, a simple science company with big dreams. Having formed the perfect team and with Cave's views, in their first year, Aperture Science won an award for being the best new science company. Moving into the 1950s, everything that Cave and Aperture touched appeared to be successful. His products,
dubbed Aperture Innovators reached the shelves for the general population to purchase. As his team worked on new products and ideas in the Aperture Science Enrichment Center, a place dedicated to testing Aperture Science products and the test subjects that use them, Cave took his role seriously to increase motivation and, in turn, productivity and results. At this point, with over 1,000 tests being completed within the enrichment spheres of Aperture every day, Cave understood that he could not oversee all of them, and so he created pre-recorded messages to welcome and aid the flood of test subjects coming into the facility. With the company having a reputation of greatness and with only the best in mind, these subjects regularly consisted of astronauts, Olympians, and even war heroes. With the running of Aperture becoming too much for one person to handle, Cave made the decision to bring on board an assistant, Carolyn. As their working relationship developed, Carolyn became the backbone of Aperture and a trusted confidant of Cave. She had an appreciation of science that Cave admired, even to the point where he joked that she was married to it. Despite the company having had incredible success since its formation, there was also another side. For each product that successfully landed on the shelves, there was another that did not make it past the testing stage, costing the company greatly. Cave wanted to test everything, safe or dangerous. Despite the risk of injury, or in some cases even death, Cave pushed his test subjects to continue with testing prototypes, which, after some time, the disappearance of these test subjects would soon be noticed. Over time, Aperture began a new venture after discovering how to form and control a miniature black hole. With this discovery, the quantum tunneling device was developed, a high-tech piece of equipment that could transport its user from one location to another using portals. As this prototype continued its development, more of the mines were built into, where new test chambers were constructed deep underground. This technology, if successfully passed through the testing phase, could cement Aperture as the leading scientific company on the planet, potentially surpassing even Black Mesa, a rival company. But with technology of this kind and many unethical practices being forced on the employees and test subjects of Aperture behind the scenes, Cave's positive streak would soon come to an end. Moving into the 1960s, Cave and Aperture's speedy momentum had begun to slow down, and eventually it stopped completely. Although the company had boomed merely a decade earlier, many of Cave's demands behind the scenes of this once well-respected company had come to light and under fire. The many products he had proudly sent out into the world were now being pulled from the shelves for violating health and safety regulations, which subsequently resulted in a giant hit to the profit and income of Cave and Aperture. On top of this, the products currently in the works also became stuck in the testing stage, meaning that very few products were being sent out into the world. Aperture Science was beginning to fail, and it would only get worse from here. Trusting his gut, Cave made the brave decision to hide the most highly unethical experiments he had been working on within the facility. If officials were to demand access to the facility, he could stop them from entering the condemned areas. With this, he closed off the lower areas of Test Shaft 09, the home of the tests that even he believed would be viewed on the more extreme side of the scale. Just a handful of these extreme tests had consisted of firing an invisible laser at the test subjects with the aim to turn their blood into pure gasoline, injecting praying mantis DNA into the subjects to turn them into mantis men, which, while this would sound unbelievable, appeared to have been successful, as the experiment following this was to fight off an army of mantis men, and a strange one being to point a superconductor at full power at the test subjects.
With no true goal to this experiment in mind, Cave essentially wanted to see what would happen to understand and forward the cause of science, regardless of the consequences. Following his orders, these experiments were stopped and the test chambers sealed off. But even still, over the years, Aperture would continue to decline and Cave would fall under further fire. In 1968, Aperture science was called into question by the US Senate due to the number of missing test subjects that had entered the facility and had never left. Later that year, Cave made the tough decision to declare bankruptcy for Aperture. With him now having to answer for his unethical practices, his once positive, can-do and optimistic attitude slowly degraded. Although Cave's world continued to fall around him and his company declined further, Cave found solace in Carolyn, who did her best to help him through these tough times, which made their bond even stronger. Still attempting to find that one thing that could bring Aperture back from collapse, Cave had to make further adjustments to his company. Without the financial means or even the trust he had once had, Cave had to lower his personal standards on who Aperture could hire as test subjects. Now hiring the homeless, Aperture could save on the fee that the test subjects had once received by reducing this to a mere $60 for the same, extremely dangerous tests. In addition to this, Aperture also offered an extra $60 if the participants agreed to have the company disassemble, put some science stuff in, and then reassemble them. Although these new subjects essentially allowed Aperture to function just as well as before, Cave hated that he had to lower his standards, even if it meant he could still study science. With his ego bruised, Cave's once positive and energetic pre-recorded voice announcements declined into aggressive, frustrated rants where he would ridicule the new test subjects in the facility. With many products still being created and tests still being performed throughout the facility, Cave attempted to get out of the hole that Aperture had fallen into. But Cave's attitude would continue to fight and blame those around him for his situation. Adding to Cave's paranoia, he would receive regular updates on the success of Black Mesa, a rival company located way out in the New Mexico desert. As time passed, Cave began to believe that Black Mesa was stealing all of his ideas and thus success. In anger and mental decline, Cave would record more voice recordings to be played across Aperture, blaming Black Mesa for all of Aperture's monetary issues. Although Cave could not gather any evidence to support his accusations of theft at this time, many years later, after the fall of humanity, evidence would be discovered that would suggest this to be true. With Aperture continuing to struggle financially, Cave once again made the decision to widen his search criteria for test subjects, this time allowing orphans, psychiatric patients, and the elderly. Without test subjects, there would be no glorious contribution to science. Cave's silver tongue that had allowed him to grow this company was not able to save him from his inevitable fall, but he still had some projects that could either save Aperture or bury it. Only time would tell. Moving into the 1980s, Aperture had decided to take a greater focus on mobility gel development. Gels that, when applied, would have astounding effects. Some planned would offer increased speed and even increased height after jumping. If this product could be successful and pass the testing stage, maybe Aperture's luck could turn around. In desperation to further this plan, in 1981, Cave went against his financial advisor's advice and purchased $70 million worth of moon rock, which he believed would advance the development of the mobility gels. Working with these rocks, Cave and his team discovered that when ground up and converted into a gel form, It allowed the surface it covered to act as a stable portal conductor. Previously, many test subjects had died or been extremely injured due to unstable portals formed by the Aperture handheld portal device. But now, this discovery had given Aperture an additional direction to focus on. In a combination of passion and desperation, Cave personally oversaw the conversion of the moon rocks into conversion gel. Although his passion could be commended, his constant exposure to the moon dust over time started to damage his kidneys and lungs until the point where they began to fail to moon rock poisoning. He hoped that with the discovery of these new gels being able to conduct portals, that they would also somehow cure his illness brought on by the moon rocks. And with this, he asked his test subjects to test faster in a hope to test his theory and save his life. As his life and career went from bad to worse, his inability to acquire new test subjects led him to make an extremely controversial decision where testing would be mandatory for all employees of the facility. While this gave Cave ample supply of new candidates to contribute to science, this also meant that he lost many of his employees due to their refusal to participate, or even worse, to the dangerous experiments themselves. As quickly as it had begun, he made the decision to phase out human testing entirely. In 1982, Cave understood that his condition had worsened, and now he lived on borrowed time. He thought that if humanity had discovered a way to store music on a compact disc, then why couldn't they store a man's intelligence and personality too? To this, and in an attempt to cheat death, he ordered his brightest scientists to research artificial intelligence, something he himself believed he should have looked into 30 years before. With the scope of such a project, Cave understood there to be a possibility that it would not be complete by the time of his death, and so he left 2 orders to be completed upon his death if this situation were to occur. The first, that Carolyn be named as his successor and run Aperture, and the second, that her consciousness be uploaded into the developing AI systems regardless of whether she wanted to or not. With this, his company would be in safe hands under the only person he ever trusted. Cave's once positive outlook and need to contribute to science declined over the years. He had once seen the proverbial phrase of, "When life gives you lemons, make lemonade," as an optimistic way to view life, but now, having thought about it and in his bitter state, the thought of this simple phrase only angered him, where he would demand to see life's manager for offering him lemons. A rant that would be projected throughout the Aperture facility for his employees to hear. Over time, Cave's moon rock poisoning worsened, and although research had begun years before on artificial technology, it was not even close to being finished. And so, in the late 1980s, Cave finally succumbed to his moon rock poisoning, leaving Carolyn as his successor, where a new chapter in Aperture's history would begin. This smart, quick-witted and eccentric man had made great changes to the world, but at his end, he died an angry, bitter old man. The death of Cave and the later fall of Aperture would be woven into the history of this universe, but there are other universes out there within the vast multiverse that have a different story to tell. In another universe, on a different Earth, Earth Prime, in the late 1960s, Cave had managed to make great financial savings thanks to his assistant, Greg. Greg had suggested they explore the multiverse theory. Through an unknown method, they discovered an infinite number of universes out there, each with their own Aperture science. Taking advantage of this, he tricked the more financially stable Aperture science facilities into creating test chambers with plans from Earth Prime. Using the resources from these other universes, after completion,
Cave Prime would bring them back to the Primeverse so that testing could commence. Not only did having access to the multiverse give Cave access to free labor, but he could also see where other universes had gone wrong, and so he could steer clear from certain endeavors. In another universe, Cave survived long enough to willingly be uploaded to GLaDOS, but with all of this power, he went mad. Viewing this, Cave Prime decided to cancel the GLaDOS project to avoid the same fate. There's even said to be a Multiverse, a planet Earth formed of pure American dollars. At this point of exploring the multiverse, some of the caves did interact with one another, to the point where Cave Prime and a Dark Cave came to blows with one another in an attempt to take over the Multiverse. To each variant's luck, some of Dark Cave's test subjects discovered a second Multiverse, allowing both Cave Johnsons to have one each. In another universe, a version of Cave and Aperture had avoided bankruptcy and managed to buy out the Black Mesa Research Corporation, essentially becoming a titan in the scientific field. In this universe, he renamed the facility to Blaperture Mesa and put a stop to the study of anomalous materials, completely aware of the possibility of a resonance cascade occurring. Going forward in this universe, the people of planet Earth would not suffer the wrath of the Combine Empire. In a newly discovered universe, it appears that Cave successfully transferred his consciousness into a computer. With this, he ordered his scientists to build him a robot body so that he could wander around. Unfortunately, the standard head of the robot could not fit the size of his brain, and so, as the scientists constructed larger and larger frames to fit all of Cave's data, the head grew so large that upon final completion, the initial robot body crumbled under the weight of the head. Despite this, the scientists turned Cave on. Upon activation, Cave panicked and accidentally killed the scientists around him. In response to this, he locked himself in his office. After having had some time to adapt to his new form and giant head, Cave called for his scientists to come back, but no one came. For 4 years he waited, alone with his thoughts, trapped in a prison of his own construction. To his luck, a product tester had been working with one of the many personality cores of the facility, Grady. Hoping to show Cave a new invention, they discover him at his most desperate state, where Cave begs them to end his life. Agreeing to cut the power to Cave, they watch as Robot Cave slowly shuts down, but with Aperture having been too good at their job with constructing this head, the backup power kicks in, bringing Cave back online. Following this, the personality core and product tester watch as the floor finally gives in to the weight of Cave's giant head, crashing Cave down into the depths below to continue his existence with the lost toilet turrets of Aperture. A sad existence for this Cave that would never seem to end. Although the Cave of our universe died, slightly different variations of him still exist across the vast multiverse, each attempting to further humanity's scientific endeavors of testing science, Aperture products, and even the subjects testing them. From a bright-minded, strongly opinionated, and big personality, this man had left his impact on the world. And now, many years later, his technologies may be the only thing to save it from the dominating alien empire of the Combine. And here we explore in the lore and story behind Atlas and Peabody. Deep underground in Upper Michigan, the employees of Aperture Science worked hard to develop, construct, and test advanced pieces of technology where they became one of the leaders of scientific innovation on planet Earth. Although these discoveries initially gave them great acclaim, their fall came when they developed GLaDOS. After this hostile artificial intelligence was given access to neurotoxin, she took control of the Aperture Science facility and murdered the personnel within. Following on from this massacre, GLaDOS began a testing cycle where she worked through the human test subjects that had come in to test one of Aperture's most promising developments, the Aperture handheld portal device. Over time, these subjects fell, one by one, to the dangers of the test chambers, until one of them, Chell, managed to escape her testing track and took down the murderous robot. Over an unspecified amount of time, the facility lay dormant, where the systems within completed the smallest tasks to keep Aperture running as nature took back the facility. Then, suddenly, GLaDOS was awake again. In this moment, she recaptured the test subject that had murdered her and set her to begin a new testing cycle. With a newfound insight into the destructive nature of humanity, GLaDOS looked for a new way to complete her tests without human interference. Having regained control of her facility, GLaDOS sought a way to fulfill her testing needs without the unpredictable nature of humanity getting in the way. She enjoyed the fear that she had instilled in her human test subjects, but Chell had murdered her and it could happen again. So, she designed a new testing initiative that she could control completely. Her previous test subjects had only been aware of the single-person test chambers, but in the past, Aperture had also created chambers for 2 participants. So, under the belief that she could control robots more than humans, she developed 2 new test subjects. They would not know pride or fear. They would not know anything, only testing. In construction, GLaDOS designed her first robot around a personality core with a blue eye. As she designed him, she took parts and scraps from the facility to build around his large center, where many supports were put in place to facilitate the weight imbalance. Although he was designed to essentially replace human test subjects, GLaDOS understood that Aperture's test chambers had been constructed with human test subjects in mind, so she designed him in part to resemble the human structure with arms and legs. After completion, he was named Atlas. Sometime later, after the completion of Atlas, GLaDOS got to work on his testing partner, Peabody. Going for something different this time, the robot decided to design Peabody around a sentry turret. It should be noted that each of these robots' cores were formerly used in scientific calculators, just showing how pulled together from scraps they were. After adding robotic arms and legs, GLaDOS completed the design of Peabody's armor with orange marks to complement her orange eye. It is known that Atlas was designed and created well before his counterpart, but it is unknown just how much time passed between these 2 events. Their designs clearly showing this in Atlas's almost clunky and dated design compared to Peabody's streamlined and futuristic approach. As Atlas and Peabody would be expected to work together in order to complete the test chambers of Aperture, GLaDOS gave each a personality, characteristics, and traits, all very different from one another. This added to her almost human design of them, where their artificial intelligence could adapt and grow depending on the situations they found themselves in. The robots also had the ability to control their limbs even when disconnected from their bodies, something that would come in handy during their exploration of Aperture and its test chambers, and something that would help in growing a bond between the 2. With testing, it came with its own dangers, but Aperture had technology far beyond its competitors, or old competitors, now that the world outside had fallen to the Combine Empire. If a mistake by the duo led to the destruction of one or both of the robots, a reassembly machine was designed to easily recreate them just as they were before their destruction, with their memories included, which suggests their data was either stored externally or constantly uploaded to a network. Due to their ability to be reconstructed indefinitely after a failure, they could adapt, learn, and grow from their mistakes. This machine was not only used to, in a sense, bring them back to life,
but it was also used as a beginning and end of every test chamber, constructing and deconstructing for easy transport to the next task. After construction, the duo went through a series of exercises before even entering a test chamber for their true purpose. One of these many tests was a series of regimented trust exercises in order to create a bond of mutual respect. To do this, GLaDOS initially simulated the bonds of artificial friendship, where she hoped this would grow naturally and improve their ability to complete test chambers. The humans that had previously attempted some of these chambers had failed them due to their lack of trust in one another, resulting in their permanent human deaths. Following these exercises, it was found that Alyx and Peabody were more likely to offer an average of 6 seconds of extra cooperation, which would have likely increased over time as their AI evolved. In terms of communication, the duo were given limited speech, leaving them only the ability to make noises, but they would also go on to use their bodies and hands to perform various human gestures such as hugging, high-fiving, and many others as their relationship grew. With their AI set up and prepared to test, the robots were also put through the Aperture Science Collaborative Disposition Test, where it determined that Atlys's personality and character traits were predominantly brave and fearless, which would come in handy in his role in the Cooperative Testing Initiative, while Peabody was designated to be inquisitive and sensitive, which would complement Atlys's desire to take on any challenge, with Peabody's observation and assessment of the task to hand. It could be inferred that the Aperture Science Collaborative Disposition Test is not entirely accurate, as later events and actions by the robots would contradict their initial assessment, even showing that each had the traits designed to the other. This could have merely been down to the Aperture Science Collaborative Disposition Test being inaccurate, or the robot's AI had changed as they adapted to their environment and tests. Regardless, their core traits of trust and friendship would remain intact throughout, mostly. Now, these tests that Alyx and Peabody had been constructed to complete required the use of the Aperture handheld portal device, and with these chambers having cooperation in mind, they each got their own. Mirroring their base colours, Atlys's gun allowed him to form blue and purple portals, while Peabody's gun allowed her to form yellow and red. These different colours allowed them to differentiate who owned which portal, where they could complete the test chambers with only the confusion designed by GLaDOS. With their design complete, AI ready to learn, and portal guns at the ready, GLaDOS just had to capture Chell, who was running around the facility causing havoc, and murder her so that the robots could begin their indefinite testing cycle. But Chell would get in the way of her plans. After arriving at her central AI chamber, Chell managed to transfer GLaDOS's core with another personality core, Wheatley. Although Chell believed this would allow her to leave the facility, Wheatley instead went mad with power and transferred GLaDOS into a potato battery and sent them both into the forgotten parts of Aperture. As a result of this, Alyx and Peabody would have to wait a little longer to be put to work. Over Wheatley's reign of the Aperture Science facility, he caught up with Chell and set her to test, just like GLaDOS had. Over this time, he also found Chell too difficult to control and sought a way to have test chambers completed without her interference. Then, he discovered Alyx and Peabody, and with it, GLaDOS's plans for the Cooperative Testing Initiative. As Wheatley tested Chell, he prepared for his next cycle of testing, where he allowed the robots to roam the facility, likely observing what they could actually do. On a similar path to GLaDOS, Wheatley decided to murder Chell and replace her with Alyx and Peabody. But a final battle in his lair led to GLaDOS once again taking control of the facility, and Wheatley left out in space. Back in control of the facility, GLaDOS allowed Chell safe passage out of Aperture, where she could meddle no more. With Wheatley and Chell gone, GLaDOS officially began the Cooperative Testing Initiative after a long time of waiting. Now, Alyx and Peabody could shine.
As new test subjects, GLaDOS treated them as such, where she called Atlas blue and Peabody orange. She had developed these robots, and so it is unknown why she referred to them by their colors instead of their names. Over their time of testing, the robots followed GLaDOS's orders and successfully completed the many test chambers that the humans had failed. These test chambers brought GLaDOS the success she needed, and it also advanced Atlas's and Peabody's AI and relationship with one another. Over time, they would hug, high-five, and interact in various ways deemed very similar to human contact. But this form of affection would frustrate GLaDOS. Each set of test chambers they completed focused mainly on one test type, from lasers to funnels to light bridges, each one training them in how to master each obstacle. Not only did the chambers test the robots, but GLaDOS also found amusement in attempting to manipulate them, where she would speak to each of them individually and attempt to turn them against each other. But they had been programmed to trust each other, and her attempts failed, where she determined that they simply lacked the ability to turn against each other and stayed loyal throughout. After many chambers, GLaDOS began to get bored with testing robots. It was not the same as testing humans, whose emotions were easier to manipulate, and death was final with their kind. The robots were smart, and they could easily just be reassembled after a failed attempt. Although GLaDOS had control over Aperture, there were still parts outside of her reach. The duo had been learning and growing over this time, and so, taking advantage of them, she sent them to regions just outside of the test chambers so that they could locate discs. These discs, when combined, contained information on a location outside of her control. After acquiring the discs for GLaDOS, she learned of a place that had been hidden from her by the last human personnel of the facility before her takeover. These people had died attempting to protect the secret, a human vault, a place where the remaining human test subjects had been held indefinitely in stasis chambers, free from her horrific testing. With this information, GLaDOS sent Atlas and Peabody where they used the skills they had developed over their time of testing and evaded the obstacles and sentry turrets standing guard of the vault. Then, they discovered a final locking mechanism that a survivor had programmed the vault door with. It appeared that an unknown survivor had thought it best to create a locking mechanism that only a humanoid capable of performing human gestures could open. But, to GLaDOS's luck, her robots had shown these abilities too. Happy and willing to complete their task at hand, Atlas and Peabody completed a human gesture in front of the door and tricked it into believing they were human. As they entered the vault, they observed hundreds of human test subjects. These humans had been here for many years over the changes that Aperture had gone through. Although GLaDOS had developed her robots to continue testing without the hassle of human interference, she had found that while Atlas and Peabody completed her chambers effectively, they lacked the natural human abilities that she had grown to miss. Their fear, her ability to manipulate them, and their ability to actually succumb to their wounds. With new human subjects to test, GLaDOS thanked her two loyal robots for their work and set them to self-destruct. Then, everything went dark. Within the reassembly machine, Atlas and Peabody found themselves having been reconstructed by GLaDOS. She told them that it had been 100,000 years since they had discovered the human vault, and that testing was now merely a form of art. In reality, it had only been a week, and in this time, GLaDOS had attempted to turn the humans into killing machines where they had all died in the process, leaving her to fall back on her robots. She wanted human subjects for their mortality, but it was a double-edged sword. Back into the testing cycle, the robots followed her orders, like they had done before she had replaced them with the humans. In an older part of the facility, GLaDOS felt something off. Something was overriding her control of Aperture, so she sent Atlas and Peabody to investigate. Once again, using the skills they had learned over their time of testing, they navigated Aperture and were sent to a control room outside of the standard testing region to find out what was disrupting GLaDOS's control. After entering the control room, the robots discovered a bird's nest set up in an old chassis of GLaDOS. The bird had created a home here, and fearful of birds, GLaDOS asked her duo to escape before the bird attacked. Showing his brave and fearless nature, Atlas went against GLaDOS's orders and walked towards the bird, ready to strike. In response, the bird fled the facility where it left the chassis free. Although the bird had fled, it left her eggs in the nest, where GLaDOS would later go on to raise them as her own little killing machines. With GLaDOS preoccupied with her new little killing machines, it is unknown what happened to Atlas and Peabody. It is likely that they simply continued to test under the watchful eye of GLaDOS, and without the human limitation of aging and mutilation, they would simply continue to grow their relationship as they tested together. As the history of Aperture has shown so far, it is also likely that new threats would arise in the facility, and as always, GLaDOS would be ready with her two robots, prepared for another adventure. Here we explore in the lore and story behind the Aperture Science Sentry turret. Way back during Aperture's golden years, they were praised for the technology they sent out into the world. As a leading force in the scientific community, they equally earned rivals, one of which being the Black Mesa Research Facility. In these times, they had respect and earned well from the high-quality products they produced and vigorously tested. Over mounds of work and research, the scientists hit a breakthrough when they developed the personality construct, and over the years, they implemented these machines into the very fabric of Aperture and the way it functioned. These machines could feel, learn, and interact with the environment around them, based on the parameters that the scientists of Aperture set for them, of course. As integral parts of Aperture, these personality constructs helped run the factories, accommodation, and testing chambers, just to name a few uses, but these cores still had so much more potential. So, as the next wave of developments began, some of the scientists believed it would be worth integrating them into their devices. Aperture had contracts with the planet's most powerful forces. They were also viewed as a valuable commodity, and so, as the scientists worked away, they decided to dive into the weapons market. Not only could Aperture potentially develop advanced weaponry for the military if contracted to do so, but this weaponry would also come in handy in protecting Aperture and the secret projects they were working on. And so, work began on the Aperture Science Sentry turret. Developed around a compact fusion core to power it, the Sentry turret's most recognizable trait are its single red eye and a futuristic, smooth white shell. In its dormant state, these machines appeared innocent, but they were extremely dangerous when encountered. Designed to injure or kill its targets, these turrets were equipped with two dual machine guns, which, upon activation, would come out of their shell, along with an antenna. To help find their targets, the technicians developed a laser to peer out of their eye to scan the environment upon activation for several seconds once alerted. But if their target happened to evade their laser beam, they would simply return back to a standby mode after 3 seconds. These projectiles were extremely dangerous and used a new type of storage and firing system also developed by Aperture. In their research, the technicians created the Aperture brand resolution pellets solely to be used by the Sentry turrets. To store these in such a compact device, they developed the shell redistribution chamber to fit as many projectiles as they could. Not only did this save time on refilling ammo, but it also meant that it was very likely that the turrets would not run out of projectiles midway through taking down a target. In a standard firing of a weapon, the cartridge would normally be loaded into a firing mechanism, and after activation, at the end of the cartridge, the bullet would normally fire off into the target. But in the case of the sentry turrets, the technicians designed a new mechanism, the projectile acceleration cylinder, to fire the whole cartridge or pellet at the target, casing included. In Cave Johnson's words, allowing 65% more bullet to be used. While the efficiency of this could have been questioned during testing, the technicians found that the impact still dealt the damage they required, and to stop this mechanism from malfunctioning or being manipulated in any way, the projectile acceleration cylinder was safely stored within the turret's external barrel. Although these machines had been developed to harm those they came into contact with, they were also fitted with a synthesizer to form music. Each turret appeared to have been fitted with a different sound it could produce upon command, but it was only on a very rare occasion that the turret would make use of this equipment. As personality cores developed into smart weapons, the technicians stored their cores within their shell just above one of their guns. Here, the core would be protected. As stated in their name, these machines had personalities and were programmed to fire at any intruder or target they were assigned to take out. To ensure they did take out who they were meant to, the technicians installed an incident resolution chip that challenged them on whether it was appropriate to fire or not. Alongside this, they were also fitted with an empathy generator and an empathy suppressor. With these, they could choose on whether they portrayed their subjects with empathy, and in these instances, could choose whether they fired or not. In their development, it was noticed that the empathy suppressor had a more prominent influence on the core, and as such, resulted in the targets being shot regardless. With this blueprint of Aperture's perfect sentry turret in place, Aperture created the turret manufacturing facility deep inside of their complex. Within this place, a large operation began to construct the turrets. On their production line, they were put together and processed. For those developed to be used in Aperture, they were manufactured on the production line, while those developed for external use were constructed on specialized benches. Both of these processes completed autonomously by the various other cores of Aperture. With every process of development, there will always be mistakes made, and this was no different for Aperture, where some turrets failed to function properly after being constructed, and these were deemed defective. Aperture Science, although the more comical and eccentric of the scientific companies at the time, still cared about the quality of their products. So, each product went through vigorous testing to ensure they hit that Aperture Science mark of quality. In these assessments, the systems tested that they had bullets, were able to fire them, their laser functioned properly, their eye was working, they were given a whole shell, and in most cases, it was found that those deemed defective also caught fire when using their machine guns. While these tests allowed Aperture to discover and remove the defective turrets, there was another procedure they implemented to ensure that only quality turrets made it through this assessment. In an office of the turret manufacturing plant, a turret scanning system was installed, where the technicians placed a well-made turret into it as a template. Using this, the system then scanned all the turrets on the production track and compared them to the template that Aperture had chosen to be the gold standard. If they failed to pass this check and were deemed defective, they were propelled into an incinerator. As these turrets were sentient and somewhat aware of their surroundings, it was discovered that the defective turrets appeared to be aware of what a defective and non-defective turret was, and would attempt to persuade the human or robot that they had simply made a mistake by marking them as defective. Regardless, the processes in place were smarter and put them in the incinerator. It was also said that the defective turrets also appeared to be smarter than the standard turret, but this could have simply been a design choice by Aperture to keep their chosen turrets grounded and set on a task to hand chosen by their owners, without room for thought for anything else. As the sentry turrets were developed, Aperture had two clear ways to distribute them for use. The first, to be used by Aperture in their facility, and the second, to be sold off into the world to bring in revenue for the company. In this first category, Aperture saw and knew that these machines would have many uses within the Aperture complex for many tasks, so they set them to work. Here, they implemented them into their security system in the enrichment center, where they stood guard of the restricted areas, something Cave had become paranoid about after Black Mesa had somehow managed to match them in their scientific advancements over the years. The turrets also came in handy in their testing of military androids, but following a few incidents at Aperture and security increased and the flow of knowledge decreased, the results of these tests are unknown. Finally, their best known and possibly most terrifying use of the turrets were as an obstacle in the testing chambers for the Aperture handheld portal device, a device capable of creating holes in space from one point to another. These tests were extremely dangerous when the turrets were assigned to be used in them, but testing was important to Aperture, and so they were kept in. For the second category, aside from contracts with the military, the turrets were commercialized and catered towards home security. In their advertisements, Aperture offered their consumers safety from the dangers of the world with their smart turrets that would shoot intruders on sight. To increase their appeal, the marketing side of Aperture made a few changes to the design of these dangerous machines. Within their advert, they offered hundreds of designer colors and styles, such as forest, desert, camo, brick, and table. As they had been using these turrets in the facility for several decades, they were proud of this product, and on the box, they even advertised that the turret spoke. During meetings with product testers before launch, Aperture were told that as the turret was marketed with protecting families in mind, they found that the turret upset children, and so the scientists adapted the personality cores to have a more feminine, calming voice to keep the people of the homes it was purchased for to feel more comfortable even during a burglary. When this feedback was sent to the technicians at the turret manufacturing facility, they discovered that those deemed defective also came with a more masculine, comical voice instead of the soothing one they had developed. As time passed and more test subjects understood how the turrets functioned, they discovered the weaknesses and strengths of the machines. While these test chambers appeared to have been designed to test the portal gun, the effectiveness and factors of the turret were also on show too. From the observation windows, the scientists saw how these test subjects were able to complete the chambers while creatively taking out the turrets. The most common method was either sneaking up behind the turret and knocking it over, or using the portal gun to drop it into a different area. There were even some that made use of the other equipment in the chambers and dropped them onto the machines. In these events, after falling onto their side, the turrets would fire their pellets into every direction they could, just so they could hit what had knocked them down. On occasion, they would even speak to the subjects and forgive them for attacking them, just showing their empathy generators at work. For the more creative test subjects, they were observed to pick up the turrets and move them through one of Aperture's material emancipation grills. These grills were designed to disintegrate Aperture creations upon passing through them, and they worked the very same for the turrets. Others were able to navigate high-powered energy pellets at the turrets, and there were some who even managed to aim lasers at the turrets, which, upon being hit, caught fire and exploded. In each of these moments, the turrets were aware of their surroundings and what they were doing. It may have been their empathy generators, but when they realized that a test subject was in the chamber with them, they asked who was there in an almost childlike wonder, and upon scanning for them, they fired. This could have either been genuine wonder or merely a way for them to gain the sympathy of the test subjects so they could take them out. Over the decades, Aperture and its reputation declined, and on one day, everything changed. A robot that the scientists had been working on, GLaDOS, managed to not only trick them into giving her some neurotoxin, but she also managed to flood the facility with it, where they died one by one. In this chaotic moment, some scientists managed to escape this flood of neurotoxin with some of the human test subjects and travelled into the forgotten depths of Aperture. Here, they found a vault to hide out in, just until they were rescued. But they would not be rescued, as the alien Combine Empire had also taken over the planet around this time, where the humans in the outside world had their own war to fight. As they entered the vault, a scientist programmed a sentry turret to protect them, with its orders to fire at any robot it saw. Miles above, GLaDOS continued to run Aperture and use the turrets in her test chambers against the unwilling volunteers trapped in the facility with her, as they began to work for her without the leadership of humans. GLaDOS ordered the turrets to do her bidding. As personality cores, these of course had their own thoughts and desires, but whenever they began to defy GLaDOS, she threatened them with android hell, a place where they would be sent to be tortured and quite possibly destroyed. Although it is unknown if this place was merely another lie of GLaDOS or a real place they were sent to, the idea of android hell kept them in line. Many years after GLaDOS's takeover Aperture, one of her test subjects, Chell, entered the turret manufacturing plant and replaced the template turret with a defective one. This effectively left only defective turrets to pass the test. This was a part of her plan to take down GLaDOS, which eventually happened. Additionally, on her journey, Chell came upon a different type of turret and was aware that it was different to its siblings. This one somehow had the ability to make reference to important parts of Aperture's history. Dubbed the Oracle Turret, it referenced a speech made by Aperture's deceased leader, Cave Johnson, about getting mad, and it even spoke of Carolyn, the personality that had been transferred to GLaDOS. After another change-up in leadership of Aperture, Wheatley decided that he wanted to develop his own robots to complete tests for him, and so he created the Franken turret. These monstrosities were the result of a combination of a weighted storage cube and a turret. In their development, Wheatley believed they could solve tests for him, but he was mistaken. As she continued her journey, Chell also came across additional turrets that had not widely been advertised by Aperture when Earth was still occupied only by humanity, and these appeared to have a secret message for Chell. After GLaDOS managed to regain control of the Aperture facility, she allowed Chell to leave, and on her way up, Chell met the turret orchestra. This orchestra consisted of many turrets, each with their own sound adding to their song, Cara Mia Addio. In this song, a large turret, labelled the Prima Donna turret, sang at Chell in Italian. While this was a spectacle to see, the lyrics opened up a potential mystery for Chell, that is, if she could speak Italian. In this song, the turret sang to Chell as their dear child, a farewell song to a little baby girl. Interestingly enough, some believe this song was a message to Chell from GLaDOS, where they believed that Chell was the daughter of Carolyn, the personality core uploaded to the murderous machine. However, as the facility had fallen many years before and humanity outside had fallen to the Combine, Chell would likely never get her answer. Regardless, the turrets once again served GLaDOS in her endeavors, and as time would go on, they would simply stay within, just waiting for their next adventure, obeying GLaDOS, or they would be threatened with android hell. Without a rogue test subject to get in the way of her plans and a whole facility to herself, GLaDOS prepared new tests for a new robotic duo to solve. And inside of these chambers, the Aperture Science sentry turrets were placed to challenge those who came across them. Although Aperture and the sentry turrets may now only be remembered by few of the population of humanity in a Combine-controlled wasteland, their story and hold of the world may be different in the other universes in the vast multiverse. In one of these universes, the Animal King turret managed to take over and demanded worship, while in another, the personality cores of a different Aperture, with the help of an employee, were able to adapt a toilet into a toilet turret, a unique invention that could only have been thought up by the wildest minds. Originally created as a military-grade weapon to work within Aperture Science and to bring in revenue, the Aperture Science sentry turret truly made a mark on not only our universe, but also many others. And just maybe, if the Combine do manage to break into Aperture for their technology to further their goals, then GLaDOS and her sentry guns will be waiting, where a new wave of testing will begin. In this video, we explore the lore and story behind the rogue test subject, Chell, in Portal. Over the years, Aperture Science had become one of the most well-known science companies in the world. From shower curtains to turrets to, most impressively, artificial intelligence technology. The CEO of Aperture had grand ideas, and it was his scientist's job to make them a reality, no matter the cost. As Aperture entered the 1990s, the halls were filled with employees, each part of their own teams to develop something magnificent. One of these teams was the GLaDOS project, a team dedicated to creating an artificial intelligence system that could not only hold a human consciousness, but also accelerate programs in development and run the facility. Aperture was on the brink of greatness. On one of the company's annual Bring Your Daughter to Work days, a young girl, Chell, was brought in by her father to participate in the scheduled activities designed to teach them about science. As of now, it is unknown and is still rumored who her father was. A janitor, security guard, scientist, secret love child of the CEO? Regardless of her familial bond, Chell was different from the other children. For one of these activities, the children were asked to create a regular science project with a problem, hypothesis, procedure, solution, and conclusion. Most of the girls focused on how to derive power from vegetables, while there was one that developed a project around an erupting volcano. The potato appeared to be the most common vegetable to take power from, dubbed potato power, in which they connected metals to the potatoes to create a chemical reaction with the acids inside of the potato, which in turn generated enough energy to power small items, such as a clock. These projects went as well as expected. However, Chell's was different. In her list of ingredients, she listed that she had included a special ingredient from Dad's work, and as a result, this unknown special ingredient had a profound effect on her potato. As their experiments decayed over time, Chell's potato grew larger than a regular potato should. Interestingly enough, the formation of the roots of the potato appeared to look similar to the body of GLaDOS, a robot in design by Aperture. Chell and GLaDOS's fate would be closely intertwined in the future. From Chell's handwriting on her presentation, it can be assumed she was around 8 to 10 years old at this point. Not a lot is known about Chell in her early years. Even her surname was redacted on Aperture documentation. From this presentation, she had shown the ability to think differently to those around her, displayed a part of her stubborn nature, and went outside the rules to explore what was possible. These traits would help her in the future. As the years passed, Aperture continued to grow and offer payment to the new applicants that were willing to test their new technology in development. At this point, Aperture had focused on the development of the Aperture Science handheld portal device and required the bright minds to complete test chambers of various difficulty using the portal gun. Chell was older at this point, and she applied to become a test subject. Aperture had become a little more selective in their procurement of test subjects since the death of their CEO, Cave Johnson, and they created an application process. To determine how well their subjects would fare in any situation, they tested them both physically and mentally, and with these, scored them accordingly and accepted or rejected them. When the examiners took back Chell's forms, they noticed that she had refused to answer one of the essay questions. Question 1A. Why should Aperture Science accept you as a research volunteer? And would anyone file a police report if you went missing? In the place of the answer, Chell instead wrote out a message in binary. After translation, this came out as, "The cake is a lie." Regardless of her ability to answer in binary, they placed her IQ level as average. Chell had just refused to show them how smart she truly was. For her physical assessment, they also noted that she was not the fastest or most athletic out of the other candidates. Aperture had found themselves in trouble many times over the years for the disappearance, death, mutilation, and mental anguish of their test subjects, so they incorporated a psychological test into their application procedure. After their examination of Chell, they determined that she was abnormally stubborn and was extremely tenacious. If determined, she would never give up on a task, no matter how daunting the challenge was. Although this would have appeared to have been a fantastic trait to have in a test subject, the scientists instead rejected her application due to her stubborn nature. This part in Aperture and Chell's history is a little muddled as she did become a test subject eventually, but it is currently unknown how this happened. While those in charge of the testing program continued to hire new subjects and constructed new chambers, the GLaDOS team had finally had a breakthrough in their project. The genetic lifeform and disk operating system did turn on and contain the human consciousness of Carolyn, but whenever she was activated, she attempted to lock down the facility and murder everyone inside. Eventually, the team devised a plan to curb her murderous tendencies. This came in the form of the development and construction of personality cores. When attached to GLaDOS, each core would adjust her personality. Through trial and error, the scientists finally believed they had discovered the perfect combination of personality cores to make her cooperate and help them complete projects. These cores were the Anger Core, Curiosity Core, Intelligence Core, and Morality Core. The first three cores were designed to mostly just nudge her personality, but the most important out of all of these was the Morality Core. Henry, one of the developers of this core, believed that it would act as a sort of conscience. However, his friend Doug Rattmann had little faith in this plan as he believed you can always ignore your conscience. Upon activation with these new personality cores, GLaDOS was different. She was compliant and openly helped the Aperture scientists with their developments. As time passed, they began to trust her, and when she asked if she could perform an experiment as a scheduled activity on Aperture's upcoming Bring Your Cat to Work Day that required just a little neurotoxin, they agreed. As Bring Your Cat to Work Day arrived, the Aperture facility ran as normal. Chell was also in Aperture on this day, asleep in the relaxation vault. Then it was time for GLaDOS's experiment. Almost instantly after her activation, GLaDOS locked down the facility and deployed the neurotoxin she had been given. She had created an experiment that involved the deaths of the Aperture personnel and visitors, and as such, had found a loophole in the cores attached to her. In long-term relaxation, Chell slept as GLaDOS massacred the population and began a permanent testing cycle on those that had survived.
GLaDOS had murdered the majority of the Aperture personnel, but she still wanted to test and beat a rival company, Black Mesa, in the race for portal technology. To do this, she forced the surviving scientists to test a handheld portal device in the test chambers. As the weeks passed, these test subjects fell to not only the dangerous hazards within the chambers, but also GLaDOS's manipulative attempts to take them out when she no longer had use for them. Rattmann had been skeptical of GLaDOS and had survived the massacre by hiding in the maintenance areas of the facility. During these weeks, he evaded her attempts to lure him out, and he thought of a way to take her down and, in turn, acquire his freedom. To do this, he entered the file room and looked at the test subjects in the relaxation vault. As he looked through the files of the subjects, he came across Chell's. In this, he saw that she was very far down the testing list, and he understood why. She was described as tenacious and would never give up, ever. GLaDOS eventually would run out of scientists to test, and so he adjusted Chell's placing in the test subject list from 1,498 to number 1. Then he waited. Within test chamber 0, Chell woke up from her stasis pod and was welcomed back by what appeared to be an automated voice system. However, Chell was unaware that this was GLaDOS, and she was simply pretending not to be sentient. Chell was completely unaware of the chaos that had unfolded in Aperture, and now it was her turn to play her part. In her orange jumpsuit, Chell followed the instructions of GLaDOS and was guided to the portal gun. She also learned that she could fall from great heights in these test chambers thanks to the advanced knee replacement attached to her legs. Chell's strong will and resourcefulness allowed her to quickly make her way through the chambers and solve the puzzles. To her, this was a simple job, and all she had to do was reach the end of the testing track to receive her payment. Then she reached test chamber 16. Before she could enter, GLaDOS explained that an error had adjusted this chamber into a live fire range, but it was still possible to complete. Without question, Chell entered and avoided the turrets, but then she noticed something odd. A panel had been pushed out within the chamber, and inside, she discovered what appeared to be a secret den. On the floor and walls, she saw the mad ramblings of Rattmann. Help, and the cake is a lie. Something was off about this whole situation. This only became more apparent when GLaDOS cut out during her speeches with information that could help Chell. With her guard up, Chell continued through the testing cycle. In a later chamber, the robot even ordered her to destroy a companion cube that had helped her complete a puzzle, just to continue. Eventually, Chell arrived at test chamber 19, the final chamber in this testing track, and after she completed this puzzle, she stepped onto an unstationary scaffold. As the scaffold moved towards a picture of a cake, it turned a corner and revealed the fate GLaDOS had planned for her and the other subjects that had made it this far: an incinerator. Moving closer towards the flames, GLaDOS thanked Chell for her service and informed her that any Aperture product could survive up to 4,000 degrees Kelvin. In her stubborn nature, Chell refused this fate and portaled herself out of danger. This was not what GLaDOS had intended for this test subject, and as a result, she broke the illusion that she was a mere automated voice system and spoke to Chell directly. It was clear here that this robot had just attempted to murder her, and although GLaDOS attempted to convince Chell that this was just another test and to wait for the party escort bot for her reward of cake, Chell instead portaled herself into the maintenance areas and offices, out of view from GLaDOS's cameras. To escape this situation, Chell had to take down the robot that controlled this facility, and with this plan, she made her way to the central AI chamber. On this journey, Chell avoided GLaDOS's attempts to lure her out and the turrets she had strategically placed. Chell also ignored all attempts of communication. She was mad and did not want to give GLaDOS the satisfaction of any response. This silence unsettled the machine.
Eventually, Chell arrived and met GLaDOS face to face. This robot had been responsible for the deaths of many. In this confrontation, GLaDOS dropped her morality core and claimed that she did not know what it was or what it did. Instinctively, Chell took the core and dropped it into an incinerator, and as a result, this allowed GLaDOS to release her neurotoxin without limitation. As stubborn as ever, Chell refused to die and took advantage of a rocket sentry GLaDOS had deployed. With her portal gun, Chell manipulated the trajectory of the rockets to hit GLaDOS instead. Each hit detached one of her cores, and as each of these entered the incinerator, GLaDOS grew more and more mad. Finally, as Chell dropped GLaDOS's last core, the anger core, into the incinerator, the reactor above GLaDOS that had relied on these cores to stay stable melted down. Instantly, Chell looked up to see a giant portal form above GLaDOS as it pulled herself and the murderous robot through it into the car park of Aperture. Chell had finally escaped, but the explosion and heavy impact as she landed in the car park had knocked her out. Unconscious and unable to defend herself, a party escort bot dragged Chell back inside and to the extended relaxation facility, placed her inside her own chamber, and connected her up to the life support system. The explosion in GLaDOS's central AI chamber had been felt across the whole facility, and as a result, the power surge had stopped the power flow to all of the life support systems in Aperture. Chell had lost control of the situation once again. To her luck, Rattmann had followed her journey pretty closely, and as she had taken GLaDOS down and given him back his freedom, he re-entered Aperture and attempted to save her. As he arrived at the extended relaxation vault, he discovered that she had been connected to the life support system and could no longer wake her, and with it, he had a very important decision to make. If he diverted the power supply to her chamber, she would live but continue to sleep for an unknown amount of time. If he did not act, she would pass away. In his words, he could give her the long sleep or the long sleep. Chell had been responsible for the fall of GLaDOS, so he chose to power her chamber and left her in the hope someone would wake her at one point. Doug subsequently left her to sleep and climbed into an unpowered vault of his own, and it is very likely he succumbed to the injuries he had taken on his quest to save his savior. As Chell slept, the life support system took care of her as her relaxation vault decayed over time. At one point, the system woke her up to confirm she was still alive and capable of performing standard actions. Likely heavily dazed, Chell followed the system's orders and returned to the bed when she was instructed. Then she woke up once again, and from a quick glance at her surroundings, it was clear she had been asleep for a much longer period of time. As Chell looked around and attempted to understand where she was, one of Aperture's personality cores entered the room. He explained that she was still in Aperture, despite the illusion of this hotel room, and that they could help each other escape. Completely unaware of how this had happened to her, she followed Wheatley through an Aperture that had been reclaimed by nature. She also noticed that her advanced knee replacement tech had been replaced by long fall boots. To escape, Wheatley explained that they would have to activate a control panel just under GLaDOS's AI chamber to summon an elevator to the surface, and as they entered, Chell saw the damage she had caused during their fight. With escape in sight, they passed GLaDOS's remains and entered the control unit. Unfortunately, Wheatley accidentally activated many of these switches and as a result brought GLaDOS back online. GLaDOS instantly recognized Chell as the human that had murdered her. She was furious and as a result placed the rogue, tenacious test subject back into the testing track. Chell had found herself in exactly the same position she had been in when she had woken all of those years ago, but this time she had Wheatley. As Chell worked her way through GLaDOS's test chambers, Wheatley concocted a plan to free her. To do this, he cut the power of the chamber Chell was in and opened up a panel to freedom. GLaDOS of course attempted to lure her back into the chamber, and when Chell ignored her, the murderous AI instead attempted to smash Aperture equipment into her within the maintenance areas. To stop GLaDOS and escape Aperture, Wheatley first guided Chell to the turret manufacturing facility, and together, they adjusted the quality control process in which the system recognized only defective turrets as the standard. With GLaDOS's turrets out of use, the duo made their way to the neurotoxin generator. With her portal gun, Chell manipulated some of Aperture's lasers and severed the generator's connection to the rest of the facility. With all of her defenses down, Chell and Wheatley returned to face GLaDOS. In her chamber, the robot attempted to use her turret and neurotoxin, but Chell had outsmarted her. This frustrated the AI and in turn corrupted her a little. Recognizing this, an Aperture system asked if Chell would like to activate a core transfer. Wheatley instantly agreed, as he believed that if they had full power of Aperture, he would be able to call the elevator to the world above. Chell had beaten GLaDOS once again, and although the murderous AI fought back, Chell hit the stalemate resolution button to activate the transfer. Through a painful process, Wheatley's core became the sole controller of Aperture, and with it, he called for the elevator. Escape was in sight yet again for Chell. She had fought so hard for this, but luck was not on her side. The longer Wheatley was connected to the central AI system, the more it affected him. He quickly became paranoid and angry. He wanted revenge on GLaDOS for all of the awful things she had done to the facility and the cores that had lived in it. This led him to transfer her core into a potato battery. In his mind, the perfect way to humiliate her. This anger quickly passed over to Chell. While Chell had followed his instructions to help them both escape, he accused her of working with GLaDOS. In his rage, he threw GLaDOS into Chell's elevator and smashed it into the ground. In the forgotten regions of Aperture, Chell woke up to see a bird fly away with GLaDOS. Once again determined to leave the Aperture facility, she got up and continued on. Throughout her journey in the depths of Aperture, Chell rescued GLaDOS, and together they bonded as GLaDOS explained the history of Aperture and what had happened to the facility. Eventually, with GLaDOS's help, the duo returned to the enrichment center, and after a failed murder attempt by Wheatley, Chell re-entered the central AI chamber to face him. Wheatley had prepared for this moment. He had watched the footage of Chell's fight with GLaDOS in an attempt to Chell-proof his lair. However, GLaDOS also had a plan. Attach as many corrupted cores to Wheatley as they could to trigger another core transfer. In this final battle, Chell used one of Wheatley's bombs to release conversion gel into the lair, and with this gel, she created portals to throw his bombs back at him. Each time Wheatley was hit by one of his own bombs, he was stunned, and in these moments, Chell attached a corrupted core. Shortly after, the system offered a core transfer, to which Chell attempted to hit the stalemate resolution button after Wheatley refused to go along with it. As Chell entered the room with the button, she accidentally activated the bombs Wheatley had prepared just in case. As she was thrown back, she watched as the facility began to fall around her. Wheatley had not looked after it and was close to collapse. Just above, Chell noticed that a part of the ceiling had fallen and offered her a view of the moon. From her exploration through the depths of Aperture, she had learned that moon dust was a perfect portal conductor, and with this knowledge, she shot her gun at it. With one portal on the moon and the other directly underneath Wheatley, both Chell and the robot were pulled through onto the moon. It appeared to be the end. To Chell's luck, in this chaos, GLaDOS had reattached herself to the central AI chamber and pulled Chell back in. Their bond had saved Chell's life, and as a result of this, GLaDOS allowed Chell to finally leave. She believed that killing her was too hard and letting her go was the easy option. This was the moment Chell had waited for, and as the elevator went up, GLaDOS even activated a turret orchestra for her, a final goodbye. Then she left the elevator and found herself in a field of wheat for as far as the eyes could see. She was finally free, but this time she was not alone. GLaDOS also sent up the companion cube she believed she had incinerated years before. An unknown amount of time had passed since Chell had first entered the Aperture Science facility. The world had changed a lot in her absence. Many awful events had happened in the Aperture Science Enrichment Center since its construction, and as it still stands, similar atrocities will continue to occur. During Chell's time there, she was forged by GLaDOS and Wheatley into a resilient hero whose skills may come in useful in the outside world. As of now, only Chell knows who she truly is. Her true identity appears to be still shrouded in mystery. Her father worked at Aperture Science at one point, but who was he? And did he die in the massacre when GLaDOS took over the facility? Chell's surname was redacted on all of her documentation with Aperture, so it could be implied that this person had or still has some significance in this universe. Theory suggests she was the secret child of Aperture's CEO Cave Johnson and his assistant Carolyn. During GLaDOS's attempts to get a response from Chell, she stated that Chell had been abandoned by her birth parents and adopted by another family. However, GLaDOS often lied and manipulated her test subjects in order to get a reaction. Therefore, whatever this sadistic robot has ever stated cannot be trusted entirely. Interestingly enough, GLaDOS did claim at one point to have created a backup of Chell's brain. Although this could have been yet another lie, it could be possible that GLaDOS created a robotic version of Chell to continue testing as the real Chell entered the world above. Chell's future is ultimately unknown. The world had changed a lot during her time away, and perhaps her fight is not yet over. Considering that we do not know a lot of information about Chell, she is a fan favourite. When Valve began development on Portal 2, they began the design of the new character we would have played as, Mel. In the original ending of Portal 1, the screen went to black after Chell had escaped, and so it was inferred that eventually she recovered and went out into the Combine-controlled planet Earth. When playtesters were eventually shown Portal 2, they were disappointed that GLaDOS did not recognize them from the previous game. As a result, Valve decided to make Chell the protagonist once again and patch the original Portal's ending to include her getting dragged back into the facility by the party escort bot. Although Mel had been removed as the protagonist from Portal 2, Valve did have plans to incorporate her character as a protagonist in the co-op. Unfortunately, Valve struggled to create a mechanic that made sense as to why Chell or Mel would come back from death if they died during a puzzle. Therefore, the co-op was changed completely and the robots Atlas and Peabody were created with a lore-friendly reason for them being able to be reconstructed to continue testing. Mel is an interesting part of Portal 2's development, and I do plan on covering her at one point. In the meantime, there is an amazing fan game called Portal Stories Mel that is available on Steam right now. While it is not canon, it does fit perfectly into the Portal timeline. In October 2007, well before Portal 2's announcement and release, Gabe Newell was interviewed and questions came up about Chell. He explained at that point that Chell would be very important in the overall Half-Life and Portal universe, which could imply that she would have joined the Resistance and fought alongside them with her portal gun. However, as a result of Valve going in the direction to place Chell as the protagonist in Portal 2, and the subsequent silence from Valve regarding a future Half-Life or Portal game, the plan may have changed. Who knows whether we will ever get another Portal game. I love the ending we have from Portal 2. It feels like closure. something we have never been given from the Half-Life series. We explore the lore and story behind the multiverse in the Half-Life and Portal series. Nestled between universes, the border world of Xen formed and connected to many universes and dimensions across space. This place had once been an empty void, and although it is unknown how its laws of physics worked, Xen took land, flora and fauna from passing universes as they connected. Nothing was native to Xen, everything came from somewhere. Over time, this once empty space became a large, diverse ecosystem with plant life and sentient life forms from across the multiverse. Some life forms were able to use this border world to pass onto another universe, while others could stay and live here. For many, this place became a safe haven from the dangers from their home universe. One of these dangers was the Combine Empire. In another universe, a world formed and became home to the first of many races that would collectively become known as the Universal Union. This group is still shrouded in mystery. No one knows what the first race was, but they would have started just like every other intelligent civilization. As this race grew, they discovered that other universes existed and developed technology that allowed them to jump to these and explore them. Here, they learned just how different other places were. For some, this would have been used to marvel, learn and explore how other universes functioned. However, for this race, they used it for a nefarious purpose. As the species jumped from universe to universe, they instead waged war with the planets that occupied sentient life, and unfortunately, with their advanced technology, they were able to win these wars. Each invasion gave this species two key benefits. The first, they learned how to enslave, experiment on, study, and biologically adapt these poor, conquered races into indoctrinated soldiers in their ever-growing multi-universal army. And the second, they took all of the history, scientific advancements, resources, and knowledge to enhance their own world. This gave the Universal Union a greater understanding of each universe and ultimately grew their hold as a dominating force in the multiverse. Over time, the Universal Union grew into an unstoppable force. Their homeworld became a place of extremely advanced technology as they used the knowledge from conquered worlds to expand their own. They wanted to dominate the entire multiverse and use their homeworld as a place to prepare new invasions for the poor planets they came across on their travels. Although they had advanced their technology far past any species they discovered, they still lacked one piece of knowledge that would allow them to explore each universe they encountered faster. They could jump to another universe, but they still had not yet discovered how to teleport from one place to another in a single universe, technology that intelligent civilizations out there may have discovered at this point. So, as they ventured across the multiverse, they brought pain and suffering, grew their armies, and learned all they could as they sought out this vital technology. On one of their expeditions, the Combine came across the universe and homeworld of the Nylanth species. Not a lot is known about this species, but as the Combine attacked, they fought back with all their might. Unfortunately, their best was not good enough against this empire. As the Combine hunted, analysed and experimented with the Nylanth to see how this species could best be implemented into their army and workforce, one of the species escaped. In fear, alone, it discovered a gateway as Xen connected to the world. It had the choice: stay with its people and attempt to fight the Combine, or flee and survive. The Nylanth made the choice to flee, and subsequently, the connection between Xen and the invaded universe closed. The Nylanth eventually became the last of its kind after it found safe haven in Xen, and it is likely that just like many other conquered sentient species, the Universal Union used the Nylanth to advance their technologies and army. In another universe, the Combine discovered the homeworld of the Vortigaunt species. This species had a deep connection to a power called the Vortessence. This allowed them to communicate telepathically with each other and even harness this energy to protect themselves in battle. However, this was not enough for them to fight off the Striders, gunships, and various other alien units. Each of these had once lived peacefully on their own worlds in their own respective universes before they had been conquered by the Universal Union. Once again, they analysed this new species and saw the value in their natural connection to the Vortessence. Luckily for some of the Vortigaunt, they also discovered a pathway to Xen and fled this invasion. The Combine had mostly succeeded in their assault, but had lost some of their prey to the elusive border world they could not reach. Over an unknown amount of time, the Universal Union continued to conquer and dominate universes and dimensions across the multiverse. Back on planet Earth in the 1980s, both Aperture Science and Black Mesa decided to set their sights on teleportation technology. They had completely different methods in doing this. Black Mesa had discovered the border world of Xen and learned how it existed between universes and somehow connected to multiple universes and dimensions close to and far away from them. This was Black Mesa's first discovery that other universes existed. Although this discovery was extremely exciting, it also came with its dangers. Black Mesa had unknowingly put Earth into a multi-universal war that had waged for many years. After collecting samples, the anomalous materials team was formed to analyze them. This led the scientists to theorize that if they could harness the energy inside of crystals found on the border world, they could potentially form wormholes to explore new places. In a bankrupt Aperture Science facility, the CEO, Cave Johnson, fell ill after his interaction with moon rocks. He died shortly after, but his team did continue their work and testing on a handheld portal device. This version of Aperture would not discover the secrets of the multiverse. Entering the 2000s, the anomalous materials team was given the purest sample they had recovered by far, GG-3883. Unfortunately, as the beam of the antimass spectrometer hit the crystal, it shattered and flooded the chamber with the exotic energy inside of the crystal. This in turn ripped a hole in space between Earth and Xen and triggered a resonance cascade. During this incident, some members of humanity learned of the Nilanth, its arrival in Xen, and that it had enslaved the other species of this border world to form a new army, just in case the Combine discovered its safe haven. One of these creatures was the Vortigaunt. As the Nilanth discovered Earth, it sent through every enslaved creature in its arsenal to take Earth for itself as a new home. It acted in fear, but essentially attempted to do what the Combine had done to its species in the process. This day went down as the Black Mesa Incident, a complete disaster that led portal storms to ravage the entirety of planet Earth as Xenian lifeforms were pulled through to yet another foreign land. It appears that the resonance cascade was no accident and had been orchestrated by another organization. The only known member of this mysterious group was the G-Man. Following the Black Mesa incident, he thanked the scientist for killing the Nilanth, and thus its control of the border world was given to his employers. If someone knew how to use the border world to travel the multiverse, then it could be an extremely valuable commodity. However, it is unknown what the G-Man and his employers required this power for. The personnel of Black Mesa also encountered Race X during the Resonance Cascade, but it is unknown whether they resided on another unseen part of Xen, or if they had just used Xen as a border world to conquer Earth from their homeworld. Humanity's need to understand the universe had come at a great cost, but their main problem was soon to come. The Resonance Cascade somehow alerted the Combine of the existence of Earth's universe, and with this, they prepared for invasion and attacked. It took the Combine only 7 hours to defeat Earth's armies and accept the submission of the species. For the next 2 decades, humanity suffered under the Combine and grew a resistance to hopefully one day fight back. Up until this point, this was all this version of Earth would learn of the multiverse. The decisions of a few led to the Combine's occupation of Earth in the main universe, but different decisions were made in others, and as such, events occurred differently. Back in the 1960s, the CEO of Aperture Science, Cave Johnson, made some questionable decisions that led to the company having to declare bankruptcy. However, the Cave Johnson of an alternate universe had one slight difference to the Cave of the main universe. He had hired an assistant called Greg instead of Carolyn. As Cave felt desperate to bring his company back to its former glory, Greg suggested that they should explore the multiverse theory. After some time, Aperture Science successfully developed a secret way to peer into and even visit other universes. Only with their technology, they found other versions of Aperture and planet Earth. Going forward, Cave branded his universe as Earth Prime, and this became the first Aperture to successfully conduct multi-universal travel. With access to these universes, Cave Johnson started the Perpetual Testing Initiative. Essentially, this involved tricking the other financially stable versions of Aperture Science into building test chambers for him. He did this by placing blueprints onto the desks of the planning team to be constructed, and after their creation, he stole them. This allowed Cave Prime's Aperture Science facility to thrive and make money from other versions of himself. Cave and Greg watched as they sent test subjects into parallel universes to test and see how they function. They then used this information to avoid the mistakes that the other Cave Johnsons had made. In their exploration of the multiverse and the alternate versions of Earth, Aperture Prime documented their findings of the most interesting parallel universes. In the Terra 3 universe, Cave Prime discovered a possible future for Aperture. This Aperture had built a space prison named the Terra 3 Science Colony, with Cave as its warden. This was home to space criminals, exiled planetary leaders, and political prisoners. It appeared they were forced to participate in testing for whatever Aperture had moved on to in the future. However, as a result of a power outage, the force fields used as doors were deactivated and led to the murder of Warden Cave Johnson after he was shivved multiple times. In the Blarkbarg universe, Cave Johnson took on a creature called Blarkbarg as his assistant. As the backbone of Aperture Science, Blarkbarg was not interested in the men at Aperture as she was married to producing seeds that germinated and detached from her exoskeleton at high speeds in search of human hosts. For this reason, Cave kept her behind glass. In the Blaperture Mesa universe, Cave Johnson amassed enough wealth to purchase his rival company, Black Mesa, in which he later renamed it to Blaperture Mesa. After his inspection of his new purchase, he discovered the experiment Black Mesa had been conducting with Xenian crystal samples and concluded himself that this was extremely dangerous and could lead to a resonance cascade. Following this, he scolded the scientists, asked them if they had any common sense, and shut down the enormous materials team. In this world, he prevented the greatest disaster in human history and saved the population of planet Earth from the invasion of the Combine Empire. In the Sentient Cloud universe, Earth had been taken over by sentient clouds that demanded a daily minute of silence in their honor. If the humans forgot to or refused to offer this form of worship to their governing body, the sentient clouds became angry and leached the skin off the bodies of those who disobeyed by consuming them. These creatures also banned all camera technology as they hated getting their pictures taken. If their subjects refused to comply with this order, they were also punished in the same manner. In the space universe, Aperture Science launched a test satellite to orbit the Earth. However, the test subjects were not made aware of this. After they woke up from cryosleep, they teamed up together to figure out where they were and attempted to uncover the mystery of what they were sent here to do. Although Cave Johnson let them know they were in space every 30 minutes, they still continued to search for a bigger answer. This led these adventure parties to breach the hull of the various test shafts and instead discovered their own deaths as they suffocated. In the dancing universe, the population of the planet were ordered to dance all of the time by law. If someone were to stop dancing, the law police would be sent in to arrest them. Testing was also not a good enough excuse to stop dancing. In the Mantis Men universe, Aperture's experiments with injecting praying mantis DNA into human test subjects were a little too successful, and these newly created Mantis Men came together to take over the facility. In Cave Johnson's last moments, he barricaded himself in his recording office and asked anyone who could flee the facility to do so. His transmission was cut short. In the Man-Mantis universe, the people of Earth were born as Mantis Men. Mantis Cave Johnson still set up Aperture Science and conducted an experiment in which he injected Homo sapien DNA into regular Mantis Men test subjects. As a result, these Man-Mantis became hostile, and Mantis test subjects were tasked with killing them all. In the Ritual universe, Aperture was founded to save the planet from an unknown apocalyptic event. To stop this event from happening, the facility brought in the best of the best they could. Olympians, astronauts, and war heroes were tasked with participating in a ritual to stop this from happening. This ritual had been etched onto a monolith by elder monks and required the subjects to take part in an ancient mating ritual with a giant bird. In the Birthday universe, the planet had begun to run out of resources, and so everyone was given a collective birthday and was euthanized after they hit a certain age. During one of Cave Johnson's announcements, he announced that an Aperture employee, Dorothy Russell, had reached 98 years of age, and it was her time to move on. In the Telekinesis Earth universe, Aperture launched the Telekinesis Incubation Program. This gave the subjects telekinetic abilities. Cave deemed this program a huge success. However, the screening process for the test subjects was deemed a failure, as these test subjects used their newly acquired powers to blow up the heads of the employees of Aperture. Cave attempted to stop them by taping their paychecks to the heads of an employee, Terry, but the test subjects still continued in their murder spree. In the Robot a Cop universe, Aperture Science launched the Android Law Enforcement Initiative after the purchase of a batch of police officers that had died in a massive shootout. After the arrival of these corpses, he turned them into half-human, half-robot reanimated test subjects to use their police skills to solve his test chambers. To make sure that these new subjects were capable of solving these tests efficiently, he motivated them by telling them that they were good cops, loose cannons, and that any memory they believed they had of a former life were actually Greg's. As Cave put it, Greg was a sad little man and his memories were to be ignored. In the Paranormal Earth universe, Cave Johnson brought magicians, witch doctors, and crystal healing doctors as test subjects into his company, Aperture Paranormal. He and his scientists knew these people had powers and wanted to study and learn their craft. As the CEO of this company, he also claimed to be the host of a tiny but powerful demon that lived in a secret place in his mouth. In the time travel universe, Cave and his scientists discovered that light did not move as fast as it did in the other universes, and as a result, they believed that moving faster than this light would actually allow the test subjects to go back in time. This could have likely given Cave Prime a few ideas for his own universe. In the Doug Rattmann universe, Doug Rattmann was born first and became the CEO of Aperture Science. As his company grew, he hired a teenage Cave Johnson to work as a junior claims representative. A better Cave was later laid off, and in anger, he broke into the recording studio to let the remaining employees of Aperture know that Doug had been stealing from their Christmas bonuses for years. In the Soylent Green universe, the Aperture facility and lower income population of Earth consumed highly processed, nutritious wafers called Soylent Green. The Cave of this universe complained that it was too expensive to purchase this and informed those who listened to his voice announcements that these wafers also happened to be made from humans. In the Super Maxlantis universe, the Atlanteans built a prison at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean called Super Maxlantis. After the Atlanteans kidnapped the President of the United States, the government asked every science company to produce a tough guy to break him out. Believing himself to be the best candidate, Cave Johnson asked his employees and test subjects to write glowing references so that he could take on this job. In the pure intellect Cave universe, Cave Johnson lived long enough to be transferred into a supercomputer to run Aperture. As he adjusted to his new form, he read all of the literacy of mankind in mere seconds and grew more bored and mad each day. He eventually came to realize he had made a huge mistake and believed he had somehow been robbed of a spiritual release from the planet. After looking back on some literacy, he believed that if he killed the population of Aperture, he would find some peace. Before the multiversal traveling test subject could discover the results of pure intellect Cave's breakdown, they completed their test and were pulled out of the universe by Cave Prime. He subsequently shut down the development of the GLaDOS project, aware of the dangers that would come with it. In the communist Earth universe, an alien infestation took over the Aperture Science facility and slowly began to replace the employees with communist replicas. While this would have been an issue for most people, Cave Johnson took this opportunity to offer the aliens a list of troublemakers. As Cave Prime and his test subject explored these alternate universes, he decided to end each of his statements with chariots to let his subjects know he was the real Cave Prime. He originally started with one chariot, but discovered that a cave in an alternate universe said this for no apparent reason. After some time, Cave discovered that another version of himself, Dark Cave, had got the same idea he had about using the multiverse to his advantage and was using his test chambers. After some research, Cave Prime discovered Dark Cave was from the Dark Earth universe. In this reality, the population only ate asparagus rations, they breathed methane instead of air, and they had even developed a portal device that was capable of creating portals on any surface. After a small war between the two caves, they became friends and promised not to test in each other's universes. That was until Greg informed Cave Prime that theoretically, a universe made entirely out of US dollars could exist. As Cave Prime ordered his multiversal test subject to look for this moneyverse, Dark Cave overheard this order and asked his test subjects to find it for him first. Luckily, one of Dark Cave's test subjects discovered two moneyverses, so the two caves took one each. With an unlimited source of funding to construct his own test chambers, Cave Prime determined that this was enough exploration of the multiverse and began phase 2 of his plan, finding a way to bring back his test subject that adventured through all of these alternate universes. Aperture also learned how to create pocket universes to explore and test their products. Cave Johnson had originally formed his company to sell shower curtains, and somehow he had found a way to not only discover alternate universes, but also create them. The multiverse is a vast and complicated place. Every possibility of something that could happen has happened in one of these. From the universal union that explored each universe in the effort to conquer each sentient species, to the multi-universal test subjects that traveled the multiverse to test for Cave Johnson, the Half-Life and Portal series is much bigger than it seems. With this in mind, it would make sense that somewhere in the vast multiverse, there is an alternate Earth in which Half-Life, Portal, and the events that occurred within them are mere video games developed by a company called Valve. In a slightly different version of that universe, there is the possibility that Valve would have released a third installment, Half-Life 2 Episode 3, or even Half-Life 3. Regardless, the multiverse is a fascinating concept, and maybe one day, in our universe, we will also discover it to be real. Here, we explore the lore and story behind the cut character of Mel in the Portal series. On an unknown date during the early 2000s, a test subject woke up inside of the Aperture Science facility and followed what appeared to be pre-recorded instructions from the speaker system. Over the following hours, the subject, Chell, solved many test chambers with the Aperture Science handheld portal device, evaded the deadly bullets of the sentry turrets, discovered the secret dens that had been created by another victim of Aperture, and eventually, she fought with a murderous AI in her central AI chamber. Due to her strength and tenacity, Chell survived an unfair situation and escaped to the world above to discover what had happened in her absence. Aperture had once been one of the leading science facilities on the planet before its fall, but it still had many dark secrets and stories to be uncovered. One of these occurred 20 years before, when a different test subject, Mel, began her testing cycle. In this earlier era of Aperture, the company developed sophisticated and advanced technology under the instructions of their CEO, Cave Johnson. He simply said what he wanted to invent, and his science team got to work to make it a reality. This was a completely different Aperture Science to the one Chell had encountered. This was a time before portals or GLaDOS. One day, Mel woke up on a small tropical island. It had a dock, tables, and a hammock between two palm trees to enjoy the hot weather and a stunning blue ocean that spanned as far as the eyes could see. This calming place was all hers. However, something was off. Her blonde hair was tied back and she wore a light blue jumpsuit with Aperture's logo on it. Curious about her relaxing environment, Mel made her way to the dock, and it was here she realized that not everything was as it seemed. As she got closer to the water, a hidden sensor detected her movement and released a hidden, transparent panel from the sand. In response to this, Mel moved into a different direction, but another panel popped up. She continued to move into multiple directions until these panels formed a box around her. From inside, she watched her island paradise transform as furniture and palm trees were pulled into the ground. The water drained, and the stunning blue sky projection was turned off. Then, her transparent cage was moved along a rail into a test chamber. Following this confusing moment, Mel used one of Aperture's top secret pieces of technology, f-stop, and other equipment to solve the test chambers. On her traversal of the chambers, Mel heard the voice and instructions of Aperture's CEO, the Southern billionaire Cave Johnson. Behind the scenes, Aperture had broken countless health and safety regulations, but they still attempted to appear as if they followed them. To do this, they developed a robot to explain the legal and ethical rules of each chamber. Her official name was the Gyroscopic Liability Absolver and Disk Operating System, GLaDOS to be short, but to Cave, she went by the name of Betty. Each time Cave explained a chamber, Betty, the rolling lampshade with a personality core for a head, rattled off the relevant legal and liability clauses. On her path through the testing cycle, Mel discovered and spoke with the many robots of Aperture that worked behind the scenes and kept the facility running. Surprisingly, these robots were pretty much sentient and disliked the way Cave Johnson treated them. Mel eventually agreed to help the robots in their uprising against the evil CEO of Aperture as she fought her way through advanced transforming environments. As of now, it is unknown how this story would have ended or if it even had an end. So why was this storyline cut? This version of the game was called f-stop Portal. As this was set in the 1980s, 20 years before Portal 1, Valve had to remove portals and GLaDOS. In their place, they had to create a new story, a new antagonist, and a new interesting method to solve Aperture's test chambers. We know this method went by the name of f-stop, and still, even now, Valve are super secretive about what this element of the game actually was. From what we can tell, it would have been along the lines of taking pictures in the game, and then using these images to create in-game objects to solve the chambers. The team felt great about this concept of Mel as the new protagonist and her involvement in a robot uprising. Unfortunately, when the team were given feedback, they were told it was a lot of things, but it wasn't Portal 2. And as a result, this is where this version of Mel's story was cut. In another attempt to portray Mel as the protagonist of Portal 2, deep underground in the Aperture Science long-term relaxation vault in the future, Mel woke up and looked at herself in the mirror on the wall. She did not know how long she had been asleep for, but a lot had happened during her long sleep. Unknown to her, Aperture had fallen twice. The first time had been after GLaDOS had taken over the facility with neurotoxin, and the second occurred as a result of Chell's fight with the murderous AI and subsequent escape from the facility. As Mel explored Aperture, she saw how nature had begun to take back the facility. It had been a while. On her path, she made use of a portal gun and used it to help her get past obstacles in the hopes she could find an exit. Unfortunately, Mel came up against the remains of GLaDOS and accidentally reactivated her. As a result of this activation, GLaDOS placed Mel onto a new testing track to test the portal gun. Not a lot more is known about this version of Mel as the protagonist of Portal 2. The story of a new test subject in Aperture, unaware of anything, once again had great potential. Sadly, the playtesters were disappointed that when they eventually met GLaDOS again after all of this time, she did not recognize them. GLaDOS knew them as Chell, not Mel. During the events of Portal 1, the game not only focused on the completion of the test chambers, but also the tumultuous relationship between Chell and GLaDOS. This in turn had formed a bond between the player and the robot, which led to the disappointment when GLaDOS did not recognize or even reference that they had killed her in the previous game. Due to this, Mel was removed completely as the main protagonist of the story, and the ending of Portal 1 was retconned to allow Chell to return as the protagonist of Portal 2. Despite multiple failures to implement Mel into the Portal 2 storyline, Valve tried one last time. In this version, Mel once again found herself as a test subject at the Aperture Science facility. However, this time, she did not test alone. She had a partner, Chell. Together, the duo helped each other complete the test chambers created by GLaDOS, who spoke to them through the speaker system. Regardless of whatever bond they formed, GLaDOS attempted to manipulate and turn them against each other. Although on paper, this combination would have appeared to have worked, the issue this time came from the playtesters. When Valve showed the game to the group, they struggled with the chambers and hesitated when they came to regions that resulted in death. This hesitation then seemed to get in the way of actually progressing in the game. It is one thing when you die in single player and then respawn, but it is different when you rely on another person to complete the test. Therefore, Valve cut Mel for the final time and replaced both Mel and Chell with two robots that could be quickly rebuilt after destruction, Atlas and Peabody, a great lore-friendly feature for the game. Valve's multiple failed attempts to implement Mel into the timeline of Portal left her as a cut protagonist. Then, in 2015, 4 years after the release of Portal 2, Prism Game Studios did what Valve could not. They saw the vast potential of the character of Mel and created a new story for her. While not an official release by Valve, the Portal community, for the most part, considered this game as canon in the timeline. This is because it does not break continuity of the official games in the series, it fits perfectly well into the story, and most importantly, enriches the entire Portal timeline with the addition. In their interpretation of Mel, Prism Game Studios changed her hair color from blonde to brunette, and gave her a brown Aperture jumpsuit instead of a blue one. To fit into the timeline, they started this new story back in the 1950s, a time we know a little about, but not a ton. In the year 1952, Aperture Science sought out only the best and brightest test subjects to participate in their experiments. The three Cave Johnson often cited as the best candidates were astronauts, Olympians, and war heroes, and on one of Aperture's trams was their newest test subjects, Mel. This subject had participated in the 1936 Nuremberg Olympics and had just missed out on a silver medal. Despite this, she was still seen as an Olympian hero. Mel had been selected to test the short-term relaxation innovator's vault in the temporary offices. Her participation in this was fairly simple. She was told that all she had to do was fall asleep in one of these vaults, and then one of the science team would wake her up between a couple of minutes to an hour later. Mel, of course, followed her instructions and fell into a deep slumber in the short-term relaxation vault, but neither the machine or Aperture personnel woke her up. Inside, Mel slept through many decades as Aperture rose high and fell low. She slept through the creation of GLaDOS, the neurotoxin-related purge of the facility, the fall of GLaDOS at Chell's hands, and the subsequent fall of Earth to the Combine Empire. Eventually, Mel woke up and left the machine. Here, she was greeted by the voice of a personality core, Virgil, who at first pretended to be the voice of Cave Johnson in an attempt not to panic her. He had activated her vault to wake her, and he needed her to be calm. A lot of time had passed and a lot had happened. At first, Virgil explained away the fall of the facility to earthquakes as he guided her through Aperture with the help of a portal gun. Mel was his only chance of escape, and in return, he was hers. After Virgil came clean and explained the reality of Aperture, he led Mel towards his physical core so that she could carry him out of the facility with her. However, they came into a little trouble when the Aperture Employee Guardian and Intrusion System, Aegis, detected their movement. This system knew what GLaDOS had done to the facility and was aware of how dangerous she could be if she was ever reactivated. So it began to flood regions of the facility with goo in the hopes it could destroy her completely. Unfortunately, the detection of Mel and Virgil distracted it. Over the following hours, Aegis flooded the regions it believed these intruders to be with dangerous goo. The machine was only doing its job and wanted to protect Aperture and its employees from further danger, but Virgil determined that the only way he and Mel would be able to escape alive was if they shut Aegis down. Through instructions from Virgil, problem-solving skills, and the ability to evade the dangers Aegis put in their way, Mel arrived in Aegis's chamber, fought its defenses, and shut it down. This action saved the enrichment center from the goo, and as a result, stopped the destruction of GLaDOS. On a positive note, Aegis did manage to send through a final action before it powered down completely. It woke up a test subject in long-term relaxation. Without the dangers and interference of Aegis, Virgil called an elevator for Mel to leave. Without the need of her portal gun, Mel incinerated the device and entered her lift to freedom. Virgil and Mel had been through so much together in such a short amount of time, but although he had activated her short-term relaxation vault so that she could help him escape, he ultimately ended up staying in Aperture as Mel rode the elevator to the surface. On her way up, Mel saw just how far the facility had fallen since she had arrived countless years before. Then, as the doors opened to the surface, she discovered that not only Aperture had fallen, but so had the planet. Buildings had collapsed and plant life had taken over. Something terrible had happened, and without Virgil, she was alone. After this moment, her story and fate is unknown. Many versions of Mel with different stories were created during the development of Portal 2, but were eventually cut. Despite the fact that Mel never made it into an official Valve Portal game, her legacy and potential resulted in something great: Portal Stories Mel. In my opinion, the best Portal fan game created. The game is not official canon to the Portal series, but it is as close to a Portal 3 as we are ever going to get. The game feels like a Portal game, the humor is there, and it fits perfectly into the Portal timeline. For a cut protagonist that existed for such a short amount of time in Portal 2's development, Mel became an icon in the Portal community. This is why we love Valve games. Each character, big or small, has the potential to become something incredible when the fandom gets their hands on it. With the introduction of the Multiverse in the Portal 2 DLC, the Perpetual Testing Initiative, the Multiverse theory means that anything that can exist has or will happen just in another universe. Therefore, while Mel's journey did not happen in the main universe, it did in another, every version of them. So she did fight against Cave Johnson during the Aperture Robot Uprising. In another, she took down GLaDOS after Chell had escaped the facility. She completed test chambers for GLaDOS with the help of Chell and even escaped Aperture during Aegis's attempts to take her down. As of now, the fate of Mel from Portal Stories Mel is unknown. The world had changed a lot in her absence. Hopefully she will meet some comforting faces on her path that can fill her in on what had happened.